at CoCo Talk, we'd like to thank the patrons who sponsor our show. So our warmest gratitudes go out to Al Hartman, Alan Murphy, Blair Ledoux, Brendan Donaghy, Brian Weisler, D. Bruce Moore, Davey Mitchell, Diego, Disney Saints fan, Eric Canales, Fedor Stamen, Glenn Hewlett, Graham Vebke, Grant Leedy, Henry Strickland, Jason Bucata, Jason Downs, Jenna Farron, Ken Reichard, Kyle Etter, Malfunk, Michael Pitsley, Paul Fiscarelli, Paul Shoemaker, Richard Lorbieski, Rob Inman, Stephen Wagner, Terry Steen, Terry Steggy, The Backyard Shed Gang, Tom C., Tom S., and Tim Lindler. Thank you ever so much, patrons. CoCo Talk is an unscripted live broadcast. Anything can and will happen. The views and opinions expressed by members of the panel and the live audience are their own and not necessarily those of the CoCo Talk show, its sponsors, affiliates, or subsidiaries. Open minds encouraged, sense of humor recommended. If any off-color comments were made, we're sorry.
Hi, this is Dale Lear, designer of TRS-80 Color Baseball, and you're listening to CoCo Talk.
This is CoCo Talk, the world's leading live talk show featuring the Tandy Color computer. It's time to drop your socks, grab your real-time clocks, and let's rock.
CoCo Talk is rocking the 8-bit world, keeping the Tandy flame alive. We may be mocked, but we'll never stop, 'cause CoCo Talk is rocking the 8-bit world.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode of CoCo Talk. Episode 165 is all about MIDI. We're talking MIDI talk. Are you ready to talk MIDI? Because we are.
CoCo Talk is rocking the 8-bit world, keeping the Tandy flame alive. We may be mocked, but
What did I say?
stop, 'cause CoCo Talk is rocking the 8-bit world.
All right, well, I've just been told in the booth that it's actually episode 175. I knew it ended in a 5. 65, 75. Who's counting? Who's counting?
2/3 right.
Yes.
We are.
Good afternoon, everybody. We have compiled a panel here. We've got some folks. We're going to talk about something very cool today.
I thought we just showed up.
We did, but that's okay. It's like going to a fight and having a hockey game break out, right? So it's just one of those things that happens. So here we are. Today's topic is MIDI talk. We're going to be talking about MIDI. We've got some people going to be showing us some MIDI, talking about some MIDI, demonstrating some MIDI. So if you are curious about MIDI, hopefully that curiosity will be satisfied today. If you know something about MIDI, please feel free to chime in. Let's introduce our panel. From the Great White North, it is L. Curtis Boyle. Welcome, Curtis.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. From Down Under, David O'Connor's with us. He knows the thing about MIDI.
Hello, everybody. Good to be here.
A guy who had MIDI for breakfast today, Mark Bosley's with us. Hey, Mark.
Hello.
He had MIDI Wheat Crunch for breakfast this morning. Or is it post-MIDI O's? I'm not sure which one it was. One of our presenters today, a guy who knows MIDI, a guy who likes MIDI. He even uses Nitrous 9. Rob Inman's with us on the program. Hello, Rob. He's muted. Okay. A guy whose middle name is the Music Man, Brian Schubring's with us. Brian, you must know a thing or two about music or MIDI.
Oh, MIDI, and MIDI all the way.
I think we lost
Hello,
Rob Inman.
everybody.
Yeah, good. Thanks for joining us. And by the way, thanks for starting that series you started too, Brian, on MIDI, doing MIDI on the CoCo. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be glad to see that continue. A guy who knows the thing about converting PC Junior joysticks to the CoCo, Rick Euland is here. Hey, Rick, how are you?
Well, I don't know MIDI, but I'm willing to change.
Our resident Apple guy is joining us from locations unknown. Mark D. Overholzer's here. Hello, Mark.
Hey, glad to be here.
A guy whose name is so nice, we must say it thrice. You know what we're talking about. We're talking about Nick Marotta. Hello, Nick. Welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So this guy is usually the guy who gets all the books and all the magazines, but apparently he's into MIDI too. What aren't you a collector of, Brian Weisler?
I don't know. You got me blank then. I got a blank. I had a little punchline ready to go. I was going to say to MIDI or not to MIDI. That's the question.
That is the question.
But then you threw me a curveball there.
All
and I had
right.
to think, and I don't do well at thinking. So
all right. Well, you'll fit right in here. We should make you head of our writing department.
You're still overqualified, Brian. That's all I can say.
Head of quality content, Miss Brian Weisler. So, Darren Ottery knows a thing or two about MIDI. He opened up our virtual CoCo Fest this year with an awesome production. Welcome, Darren. Thanks for being here today.
Hey, guys.
And the guy who loves music, especially when people sing, Ron Delvaux is here. Hey, Ron, how are you?
Hi there. Me and my first color computer.
MC10.
Yes. And this is my Nick Marotta face. Nice and close.
Uh-huh.
MC10.
All right. The madman, Simon Jonason, is joining us. Hello, Simon. All right. From down under, a guy who likes to say,
Oh, crocky.
Nicholas Marentes is here. G'day, Nick.
G'day.
And you know him. You love him. He's enthusiastic, everybody. It's
David Ladd.
David, tell us, are you feeling excited about talking about MIDI today?
Oh, hell yeah. Is everybody ready for today's show? I'm sure you guys are. We're going to be discussing MIDI, all the data rates and all the serial that MIDI uses, and all the lovely instrument banks we get to play and listen to. Oh, yeah, it's going to be a musical event you don't want to miss.
All right.
Evie, let's move it.
All right. I'm sick.
All right, yeah, okay, there we go. The creep factor just went to 11. All right, so we're here. Thank you, David. Your enthusiasm is something. We've got a live audience. Nick Marotta's out there, 8 bits in the basement. Curtis Boyle, TJB, Chris is out there, Nimble, Terry Steen, Robert Murphy, Frodo NL, James Jones, Nick Marotta, Mark B, Mark Overholzer, Retro Innovations is there, Terry Steen, Tim Franklin, Dave and Sharon, that's Mr. Dave, and Rob Inman, all in the live chat. Canadian Retro Things has just joined in. All right, so we've got stuff to talk about. We're going to be getting into MIDI, but before we get into MIDI, we're going to do everyone's favorite segment. We are going to go over the GameON results and the high score challenge. We've got a brand new CoCo Thoughts from Samuel Gimes. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's start things off with CoCo Thoughts, and then we'll see how we did this week with the Game of the Week. And this is a brand new segment from CoCo Thoughts. By the way, this is CoCo Thoughts number 50. That's how many CoCo Thoughts we've had right now. So that in itself is worth celebrating. So here we go. Enjoy the latest CoCo Thoughts.
Unfortunately, this is a reading one, so the audio listeners.
For the audio
Yeah.
listeners, you're going to have to watch the video.
Yeah, that needed a voiceover, and I wasn't about to screw it up. But for those of us who read it, that was, as always, Samuel Gimes is a very deep thinker. Those were some deep thoughts. That was some good, clever humor going on there. Thank you so much, Samuel Gimes. All right, so are we ready for the high score results? It's a rhetorical question, so here we go.
High Score Challenge
with Nick Marotta.
Hello and welcome to another week of results where we played Arkanoid this week with 23 people. Our Alan Murphy, 27,960. Joshua, 34,180. Mark B, 35,020. Ken Reichardt, 37,770. Brian Weisler, 38,680. J. Ray Blade, 41,900. Michael Klein, 41,910. Lawrence, 44,610. Tom C, 57,810. Jim Rye, 65,880. Tandy Color Computer 3, 70,280. Bryza, 81,750. L. Curtis Boyle, 86,620. Me, 93,830. Paul Shoemaker, 104,410. Mr. Dave, 104,610. 8-Bits in the Basement, 138,260. David Croker, 139,990. Tasman, 143,820. Buck Owens, 172,210. Catlord, 179,470. Rogelio, 208,160. And the number one score this week was Canadian Retro Things with 222,320. Thank you for another fantastic week, guys. So yeah, we had a brand new name at the top of the leaderboard this week, which I like. We've had
congratulations, Canadian Retro Things.
That was Ken from Canadian Retro Things.
As long as we kept it in Canada, that's the good thing.
That's right. The cup is here where it belongs. And a special shout out to J. Ray Blade. That was his first score that he submitted. So welcome to GameON Challenge. And also Core Dream Studios, who missed out on a deadline and was sad by that. But hopefully he will take part starting this week. So it's good to see some new blood coming into the.
And it's good to see Curtis not win it, to be honest. So no
and
personal
not
animosity.
even make the top 10. Yeah. I mean, just to rub it in.
Yeah,
that's my favorite part.
Yeah, no personal animosity. I'm just glad that you sucked and crashed and burned. That's all. So
I'm gonna grab this.
I'm glad to meet expectations. That's all I can say.
Meet and exceed.
Do you need to share screens?
Can I grab the screen? Yeah.
You can. You just put it back when you're done, okay?
Okay, let me try and share just the browser this time. I think last time I shared too much.
This is a show about sharing.
Overshared.
You overshared TMI, was it?
Can you see that?
We certainly can, Nick Marotta.
All right. So we had the review from Rainbow, which was pretty favorable. So there was a new variation on an old classic. I just want to draw your attention to this part though. Apparently, this guy thought that this was an original Tandy game because he went on a tirade, kind of like Samuel Gimes did, about the fact that it's a space game, yet has nothing to do with space. And really takes umbrage with the fact that who are they? They destroyed your planet, and they're coming after you. And what's this Voss? And what a bunch of junk, he says.
Wow.
The only thing even remotely resembling spaceships during play is a laser item that allows you to shoot at the bricks. So he was pretty upset about this misrepresentation that was apparently on Tandy.
Wow.
This is actually something a lot of the Rainbow reviews had. They were giving them to like hardcore geeks to do reviews for some reason instead of people that actually followed arcades or anything else. So a lot of the reviews, the people had no idea what they're playing,
completely clueless,
or anything else.
So I thought this was really hilarious. The guy was just completely clueless. And he had he says my other complaint. He had another complaint about his.
Oh, okay. So I'm not done pissing in your Wheaties. Wait, I might actually take a dump in there too. So hold on.
His first complaint was his joystick wasn't working properly.
Okay.
So I didn't need to say that.
Obviously, the game's fault.
But then he went on this little tirade, which I was actually thinking of getting someone to read and voice over.
We need a dramatic reading of this.
But
yes.
I didn't follow
Which
up on that.
joystick?
It was a deluxe joystick. It was back in the day. This is a reviewer from Rainbow who complained that his joystick didn't work properly with the game.
But the fact that this is essentially Breakout in space, nobody's denying that. But
it wasn't Tandy. It was Tato.
No, I get that. But there were a lot of things that this had that Breakout did not. Like bricks you couldn't break, bricks that took more than one hit to break, aliens and enemies that came out after you.
He points out the innovations.
Yeah.
Which I guess he also credits Tandy for. You know, the aliens, the doors, and the power.
So this was obvious. There's no disguising the fact that this game is completely derived from Breakout, because it literally is Breakout, but it's Breakout in space on steroids. And boom, there you have it. That's all you had to say.
I wish Rick Adams was on today, because the reviewer here is Jim Essel, and isn't that the guy that he carpooled to work with Dale Lear with?
I don't know.
Is he the one that wanted to jump in ramen space as well?
I don't know. Listen, everything's better in space.
So anyway, that was the point of this, is that just the reviewer was giving Tandy credit and blame for this game. It was an arcade.
Yeah, because when you read the description of Dale Lear's Firecopter game, the thing you're shooting at is an android. Right? So they even had to put some type of sci-fi theme on that, so you're going after an android. So
I couldn't find any other footage of Arkanoid, so I have this loser playing.
Whatever.
Sorry, guys.
Some dipshit loser. So yeah.
But so what do you guys think of the game?
By the way, you should have grabbed my score from here and put it in the challenge.
I think there's a statute of limitations on those
is it
scores.
really? Okay, the statute.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay.
So I think I'll start off and say this is one of the most arcade perfect ports that the CoCo 3 had, done by Steve Bjork, of course. And I thought it was excellent. And there was a CoCo 2 mode as well, which some people played the CoCo 2 mode and preferred the CoCo 2 mode, which I thought was kind of interesting. CoCo 2 mode only has 22 of the levels. But I don't know. Some people really like the CoCo 2 mode.
Well, the interesting thing too is when Steve Bjork has talked about this, is that essentially the game is the same game. It's the same core. It's not like there's two versions of the game on the cartridge. From what he was saying, it's the same game, just depending on what it's running on. It is what it pulls as far as what modes it'll pull up. But the actual logic and AI and all those routines is the same base code. So that's kind of interesting, having the multi-purpose software. Instead of being like two programs, it's one program with two modes.
Right.
So
like Tetris.
Tetris does it.
Yeah.
So I was talking a little bit with Tom C yesterday about this game, and we were talking about how hard level 3 actually is. And one of the things Tom C pointed out is that in the arcade, the monitor was rotated. So it was high. It was a portrait mode.
Right.
So the bricks were actually further away from the paddle.
Yeah.
So on level 3, where you start off and you're right up against the bricks, so level 3 is actually harder on the CoCo version than it is in the arcade.
Right.
So maybe, So there are some differences, of course, but
that was a level that took me literally. I think I played it for like about 2 or 3 hours there. I think I made it to level 4 maybe twice.
And Steve recreated the levels just as they were in the arcade, but I felt even in the arcade, level 3 probably should have been a little later, because it's actually pretty hard compared to some of the ones that came after.
Are we talking about this game or Popstar Pilot at this point?
Yeah, maybe Nick Marentes can patch this game and move the levels around a little bit for us. But yeah, I thought this was a really good port. I don't know if anybody else has.
No, absolutely.
It's one, like you said, it's one of the closer arcade ports that CoCo got, like an official port. It's actually one of the best. I'd bring it up the Rampage, type thing, as being close to the arcade.
Absolutely.
It does lend itself to an analog joystick.
You have to. Yeah.
So
unfortunately, some people couldn't take part because they didn't have a true analog controller. So, and
yeah, because your position on the bottom of the screen is actually literally your position on the joystick itself, going left to right. So you need those extra positions, otherwise you just jump around.
Mm-hmm. So with the focus of this, well, we count score, we don't count score. You know what I mean? But if you're going for score, each of those guys moving around is worth 1,000 points. So if you want to rack up points, especially on the first level, kind of hang around and pick off a few of those guys before you clear the level. That's what I kind of did. Of course, balancing the fact that the ball is getting faster and faster, and you have to decide when it's going to get too fast for you to survive. Not that my score was fantastic. I was number 10, but...
Is there certain power-ups you guys found the most useful, besides the slowing the ball down as you just
lasers?
I didn't like this. I didn't like the ball split as much because you don't actually get any other power-ups during that. So if you have the ball split, then you don't get that. You have to wait until you get down to one ball again until you get other power-ups. But yeah, laser's good.
Laser
sticking to the paddle is good.
Fat paddle is good too. The wider paddle is helpful.
In all my playing, I never found even though they're there, I never found the extra player or the breakout to the next level. But they are in the game according to the manual, but they're extremely rare.
Yeah, I think they don't appear to the later levels if I remember correctly. I used to be better at this game, but I'm totally suck at it now, as Steve pointed out.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, Curtis didn't even make the top 10 this week. If you didn't know
yeah,
that or not. So
I'm hearing some excuses coming away from across the country there.
Yeah. Mr. Dave says he avoided the slowdown. Terry Steen,
oh, really?
Yeah, Terry Steen says we need to have some CoCo game, no ports cosplay at CoCo Fest. I want to go as a donut with a dilemma. And Rob Inman says I'll be a pop star pilot. Okay, so getting a little off topic there, but that's fine.
I did like all the backgrounds too changing, every level.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
one thing the CoCo 1.2 version does not have, unfortunately.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, the sound effects I think were probably digitized from the original source, like digital samples. Yeah, the better colors, the backgrounds, the sound effects.
The sounds weren't exactly the same. Like in the arcade, the ping had a bit of an echo effect to it.
Okay.
Whereas in this version, it's just a straight, bing or straight tone. But so it's not 100% converted, but
yeah, it's good.
The gameplay itself is really, really accurate.
If somebody wants to be really enterprising, one thing I wouldn't mind seeing is actually, because I'm assuming that the tile maps are actually fairly simply stored because there's so many of them on the cartridge, is to actually for somebody to write an editor so you can create your own levels.
That would be neat.
Rob's comment, the L in L Curtis Boyle stands for Arkanoid loser.
Oh!
Yeah, it's a good game.
Please feel free to send in your Curtis flames to... We should make that a regular segment. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, and one trick here is for the purposes of the GameON challenges, I wanted you guys to start at level 1, which meant you had to go back and change it every time. That's okay. But you guys did it, so...
Yeah, that was a little annoying actually, that you had to keep resetting it every time. I guess it's nice if you're just playing for the fun of it and you want to just get through levels as much as you can. But
yeah,
it would have been nice if there was an option to say restart every game at 1 versus just having to manually do it every time. Because I did forget quite a few times. So crap.
Well, so not only was your score low, you cheated.
Winners never cheat and cheaters never win.
Haters gonna hate.
That's right. I don't hate you. I don't hate you.
Yeah, so, but the rest do. So.
Yeah, well.
Oh, it sounds like a real discourtesy.
Oh.
Discourtesy. That was funny. Good deal.
Right.
Good deal.
So, thanks again that was a great week.
Anybody had any other tips and tricks on the game? Anything like that?
I found, like myself personally, when you're near the end of the levels and you're trying to hit a specific little brick that's left over, or 1 or 2 of them anyway, that getting the magnetic one, because depending how far the ball was locked onto your paddle left to right, you could kind of guess what the angle would be. You could get it much easier than just trying to hit it while it's in motion. That's about the only trick I had.
Yeah, getting the last one was a pain.
Obviously, don't listen to my tricks. I didn't even make the top 10. So.
Very nice. Very nice.
So, are we ready to hear about next week's
Are we
game?
ready to? I am waiting with bated breath to find out.
So
I'm not ready.
So this was a late game. We're going to go early now this week to an old classic. And I think you guys will recognize it.
Ooh, Canyon Climber. Canyon Climber.
1982, 16K, CoCo
1, 2, and 3.
It's the summer of Steve Bjork.
Yes, yes. This game can be played with keyboard too.
He doesn't have the primary credit on this. He worked with somebody else. But
this is James Garon.
James Garon, yeah. So, your basic. Avoid the arrows and the falling things and whatever. And
Loosely based on Donkey Kong, I guess would be one way to describe it.
very similar, especially this level looks a lot like Donkey Kong.
Yeah, the first level where you have to put down the dynamite, to me that reminds me of the rivets, putting down all the rivets to clear the screen. The one with the ramps and the ladders, if you can't tell me that's not inspired by Donkey Kong. But the third screen, that is somewhat unique where you're hopping over different levels to get to the ladders to go across. So it's actually, the third screen is a kind of a variation on the second screen. It's still the same kind of pattern of going up an arc and climbing a ladder and going across, but you have the falling, I'm assuming the rocks the birds are dropping on you. Could be, I don't know, could be violent bird poo, but it's whatever the birds are dropping, it will kill you. So you got to avoid the falling.
Serious crap.
Yeah, serious crap right there. Absolutely.
So again, thank you guys for taking part. Thank you, Stevie, for allowing me to run this segment. It's really fun. And,
Absolutely.
We'll see you guys next week.
It's everyone's favorite segment of the show. Well, speaking of everyone's favorite segment of the show, we are going to run Who's New to Discord this week. Then we're going to take a commercial break, and then we'll be back with the main part of our show today, which is going to be MIDI talk. So what commercial would we like to run? Actually, I already know. Because we're going to be talking about CoCo's stuff and MIDI that runs in Nitrous 9, we will run a Nitrous 9 commercial. So we'll be back after these words, everybody. It's time for everyone's favorite segment, Who's New to Discord This Week? Please welcome our Gertz93, Ryan. His first system was a CoCo 2, still has that with a CoCo 3, and is running DriveWire. CJS Kurt is into Homebrew 6800 and Japanese early micro systems, and was referred by Seat Safety Switch. GOS Ryan is into the CoCo, which started his career, and is looking to get a Model 4 working as a terminal. Core Dream Studios Dan is into the CoCo 3, Apple II, Commodore 64, and consoles. Rock and Roll 1991, aka Ed on Discord, is into the Apple II, the NES, and 6502 systems, except Commodore. Also a special thanks to Boyson Tech, our CoCoTALK patrons, David Ladd, Jim Rye, Paul Fiscarelli, Rob Inman, and Terry Steggy for boosting the Discord server. Join us on Discord at discord.cocotalk.live. See you on Discord, everybody!
And now, this message.
Hi, it's Curtis Boyle, part of the CoCoTALK crew of people.
Hey everybody, this is Bill Noble, co-author of Nitrous 9. You are listening to CoCoTALK Live, the leading live CoCo talk show.
Good day, mates. This is Nick Marionettes, author of such color computer titles as Donut Disaster, Rupert Rhymes, and Rockstar Pilot. And I am here today to tell you about the world's most fabulous operating system, OS 9. OS 9 and its current incarnation Nitrous 9 is the most advanced operating system ever created. And what makes it so good? Ease of use. I find OS 9 so incredibly intuitive that I haven't once cracked open the user manual, and yet I've been able to create such incredible games faster than the time it takes to sing Waltzing Matilda. Using OS 9, I expect my next game, Funstar will be done this weekend and distributed exclusively on ROM cartridge. OS 9 forever.
Any resemblance to actual events to persons living or dead is purely coincidental.
Hi, this is Max Jackson live from CoCo Fest. And you listen to The Real Game, Steve's Show.
We're traveling through a dimension both of sound and ideas. We're at a place where the mind can comprehend and devise a solar radio, a wireless transmitter, measure time and light. 65 electronic projects brought to reality with this science fair kit. Astonishing? Perhaps. But you can find it for Christmas for $17.95 in a place that's known as Radio Shack.
Radios, stereos, recorders, everything in sound.
A whole new approach. Faster than ever. A window to a world of possibilities. Clear your expectations. Clear your hesitation. Just hit clear.
Download EOU today at lcurtisboyle.com.
Hi, this is Sean Wheatley, and you're listening to CoCo Talk with the original gamer, Stevie Stroh.
The music is back. Get your motor running. Head out on the highway. Looking for adventure. And whatever comes our way. The Midi Maestro. Available now only from Retro Innovations. As seen on CoCo Talk. Go the number 4retro.com.
Oh yeah, get your motor running, everybody. It's time. It is time for MIDI talk. We're going to be talking about MIDI. How do you spell MIDI? What does it rhyme with MIDI? What flavor is MIDI? What color is MIDI? What's the smell of MIDI? You're going to learn all those things and more today on MIDI talk. L. Curtis Boyle, you want to go ahead and set the stage for us?
Yeah, so basically Jim Brain has rekindled the MIDI hardware cartridge because there's two ways to play MIDI on the CoCo. You can use the Bitbanger port to output. You just make a little cable and you send it out, and there's several programs that support that. It doesn't let you do any recording. I think it's only for playing MIDI, so that's kind of like the poor man's version, I guess you'd call it. And then the MIDI pack is something that was designed and sold by Speech Systems originally. Then Glenside took it over and was generating it for the Glenside Computer Club, which is, of course, the sponsor of CoCo Fest. And one of the people that actually helped make that version of it is here on the panel. We'll be talking about it today. And then now Jim Brain has actually made a new version that is now on sale that actually has some improvements that Brian can talk about as well. And also Jim, if he manages to join us here. So I'm not a MIDI expert. I did play with it a bit back in the late 80s, early 90s, I guess it was. I borrowed a synthesizer from my roommate at the time. So I actually had Ultimuse, one of the programs that we'll be talking about today. So this is just going to be basically a MIDI primer, like what it is, what you can do with it on the CoCo, the fact that it works on the CoCo 1 and 2 and the CoCo 3, and there's different software packages for each. And our main people that are going to be talking about it today are Brian Schubring, who's been doing a series of MIDI videos on the CoCo here, just started this last week. He's got 2 episodes out so far. Rob Inman, who's done some fiddling around with it himself and will be doing some live demonstrations. And then Darren Ottery, who actually did a huge production here at the beginning of the CoCo Fest, virtual CoCo Fest we did this year, as you mentioned earlier. And we will be doing a follow-up episode, getting more into the details. This is more of an introduction to the software, introduction to the hardware, introduction to MIDI itself. But we plan on actually having some of the same panelists on later on, and maybe some other ones too, to actually get more into the details on a future episode. And I think to start it off, I think Rob Inman will be doing a bit of a slideshow just to kind of explain what MIDI is.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Do I sound okay? I've had to reboot a couple of times.
You sound fine.
Okay.
That's good here.
Okay, so let me
clear my throat.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
His throat's a little hoarse after singing that song earlier.
Was it Mr. Ed?
All right, let's see if this works out. Can you guys see my screen okay?
We can see it.
All right, I had to switch to a single monitor.
There we go.
Here we go, MIDI Basics and the Tandy Color Computer, brought to you by Retro Innovations and the new Midi Maestro pack. Order yours today. Just to pivot off of what Curtis said, I didn't get a chance to use MIDI very often. Back in the day, it was very expensive. Everything in the rainbow was $100 for these types of packages. So even though I did have a synthesizer, I never got to take advantage of it. So it's pretty exciting that we have all these options today, and they're all available to use at no cost. So what is MIDI? It's a protocol, a set of agreed rules that enables music to be stored as a set of instructions. So these are instructions that a MIDI-enabled musical instrument can read and understand to create music. On the right is an example of that. Guitar Hero uses a set of instructions, right, to represent the notes, and then you play along and collaborate with that application. MIDI instructions contain a lot of data. Well, it can be very simple and very complex, and so all the data can include the pitch, length, attack, sustain, various instruments, and they get larger and larger as the more complex they are. Just hitting the dial on a synthesizer, kind of what I call the wah-wah dial, can create hundreds more notes. So the CoCo cannot play complex modern MIDI files, but there's plenty of available files, and we'll talk about those in a second, that you can take advantage of today.
Okay.
What is it to store images? So this is an example of images as opposed to sound. If you're storing a bitmap image as opposed to a vector image, and a vector is a series of instructions. And in the same way, a sound is comprised of here sampling and MIDI being a series of instructions. There are hundreds of CoCo friendly tracks available to play. I clipped out a few that I saw on the SDC archive image that you can download for your CoCo SDC. There's a brand new image that was released just a few weeks ago, and it has even more stuff than the previous one in terms of MIDI and music applications. Don't forget to search the archive. There's other things you won't find on the image or not as easily, and you can download those individually. So this is an example of searching for the word MIDI, and you can see a whole bunch of stuff comes up. And then I just highlighted 4 of the most common MIDI programs and what they require to run, and a couple of bullet points on what they are and how they pitched themselves back in the day. So Lyra is a CoCo 1 and 2. It only requires 64K, and it does have an OS 9 version, or you can run it in Deck B. It has a graphical GUI interface, and you can edit your music score up to 8 different parts. Musica is another one, and this one only requires 32K. Also for RS-DOS, and this is by Speech Systems, and they created one of the original MIDI packs that I believe the Jim Brain product is based off of.
Yeah, and it predates Lyra 2 by a few years. This is the oldest one of the ones you're presenting today.
Mm-hmm. CoCo MIDI Pro, I think you would say, Curtis, was one of the more advanced
I would say the most advanced as far as
most advanced.
full capabilities of MIDI. Yeah.
Yep, can record 16 tracks. It requires a CoCo 3, even though it is in semi-graphics, as you can see, but you can select up to 64 colors. And it does require full 512K, and but you can actually record back into the application, and we'll be talking about that today. And of course, Ultimuse, which is an OS 9 application. Graphical interface runs in the highest resolution mode, 2-color mode. You can also select those colors, and I was very interested in getting this working, and it does work now in Nitrous 9 Ease of Use Edition. So we'll talk about that, and we can flip back through any of these slides if we want to later. And of course, the Midi Maestro pack, which is available now from the brains that brought you CoCo Flash. It's fully compatible with existing software, which is the exciting part of being able to just plug and play. Works with Dragon, and has in, out, and through connectors for any keyboards or MIDI products that have those ports. And you can get it now from go4retro.com.
Yeah, and there's options for getting it with a case. There's options for getting just the kit version if you want to like solder the board yourself. So there's different options available on his website.
Yeah, so do you want to flip back and talk about any of the others, or any of the MIDI experts want to kind of highlight something? This is kind of new to me.
Well, Darren and or Rob, any comments?
I just love CoCo MIDI Pro. It is a pro product, and it's the heart of my workflow. You can do anything with it. If you can think it in MIDI, you can do it with CoCo MIDI Pro. So I just encourage anybody that really wants to write music with their CoCo to really get into that product and have a good look at it.
And that one supports MIDI in, where you can record live off your keyboard as well as MIDI out. Does it support the MIDI through as well?
Yeah, it does. And what I love about it is with my setup, because I've got a lot of outboard keyboards where you can use the different MIDI channels to play different parts, bass, drums, and so on. But you can, if you record in on a certain channel, it'll record that MIDI channel as you're playing. So you can assemble all those parts and immediately play it back without having to juggle things around, if that makes sense. So if you're playing drums on channel 10, it'll record that channel number and play it back properly. And I'll do a video sort of recording a workflow so you can see how those tracks all progress out really quickly.
That'd be great.
Cool. I'm glad you're here to talk about that, because that's something I've seen demonstrate at the fests 30 years ago, but I don't remember much about the fact that you actually are using it, even now. I think is a testament to how good that software is.
Yeah. Dave, you do a fair bit with MIDI too. I mean, you do a lot of CV and gate, but you do a bit of MIDI stuff, don't you?
Yeah, probably. My workflow is probably a third CV gate, a third MIDI, and a third audio. So it gets an equal pressing here. So yeah. It's just about everything I've got here has got some form of MIDI in or out. So it'd be silly not to make use of it.
Right. No. And for those who have never been to a CoCo Fest, and that's where I've met Brian Schubring, was at CoCo Fest. But Brian, the music man, has been providing music at events for probably going on
decades.
30 years. But so Brian and will bring a whole, and it's a CoCo. He's got a CoCo hooked up to a huge sound system running MIDI keyboards and playing all kinds of music all weekend long. When we start off CoCo Fest with the national anthems, he'll play the national anthems from United States and Canada and any other countries that were there. I remember one year we had Brazil as well. We had Canada, US, maybe even the UK. So Brian Schubring, you've been doing a lot of stuff with MIDI instruments and driving those instruments through the CoCo, and it's kind of great timing because you started your series on stuff, and you're producing a series of videos, kind of giving people some information on how to put their toe in the water on this. So who was going to show us a little show and tell today? Was that going to be you, Rob, or was that going to be Brian, or a combination of the above?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah, combination of. I have some ready to go videos. Brian, we could start with Brian, and then I could show the videos and do a couple live demos.
Yeah, I mean, I think really you got to hear it, right? You just need to hear the music, and I think I don't know if we were talking about this before the show or whatever. Maybe it was last night when we were on Discord. But it's kind of like been this whole arc on how we've been enjoying music on our computers. Like, I didn't get into MIDI on the CoCo. I kind of got out of the CoCo around '86, but I got into MIDI on the PCs, and especially like in the Windows 3X era. And so I went through a period of time where you were collecting hundreds, if not thousands, of MIDI songs, and that was the cool thing to do, is to listen to really cool music on your computer that were MIDI files. And then it kind of went from MIDI to the what's the Commodore Amiga tracker files, the mod files.
Mod files.
So we went from MIDI to mod files, and you started playing mod files, and it's like, oh wow, man, this is really cool. These sound like real instruments now. And then from there, I just kind of went to MP3s, and then we were like, well, crap, I can hear the real song on my computer. And so I think we've kind of lost some of the appreciation of hearing the MIDI music, because it's almost like if you hear MIDI music now, unless it's done well, it almost sounds like a carnival compared to obviously playing an MP3 file with real instruments and stuff like that. But I guess it depends on the track, because if it's an electronica, like an electronic synth heavy track, well, that's all keyboards anyways. But if you're trying to do MIDI to play guitar or play certain instruments that just don't sound the same, it kind of shows its limitations. But I was a huge fan of not only collecting and playing MIDI files on my DOS PCs and Windows era PCs, but I also had dabbled in playing with MIDI with instruments and recording my own tracks and stuff. I'm musically illiterate, but I was able to compose multi-arrangements in MIDI and save them and play them back and stuff. So I had fun playing with it in the 90s. I enjoyed it, but I've never seen it or heard it on the CoCo, so I'm really looking forward to what you guys have to show off today. So.
A funny thing is, in the pro music community, MIDI really never left. Like, MIDI has been a constant way of making music since around 83, 84, right through till now. And I think a lot of the pro musos never really got into the mod players because of the lower sample rates. It kind of didn't sound right to a pro musicians, whereas when you're using MIDI, the only limiting factor is the outboard gear that you're driving.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty cool.
I was going to mention that too, that basically the samples that are on some of the MIDI keyboards, I mean, you can get the cheap keyboards, and it does sound like Steve was mentioning a little bit, warbly or not that, not like a real guitar or whatever. But if you have the high-end MIDI synths, you can get, basically they have the samples in there that are literally, as good as a 44 kilohertz, master type thing.
Yeah.
The thing with MIDI and with with MIDI files too, as you would know, Darren, is MIDI will record and play back what you give it. So if a MIDI file sounds ordinary, it's either one of two things. Either it's ordinary, an ordinary performer put it together and there's no feel or no nuances, no pitch bends and no human stuff. Either that or the synth that you're plugging it into is a very basic synthesizer and can't do justice to the data in the MIDI file.
Right.
Well, I know we're talking about MIDI with regards to music, but one of the interesting things that with MIDI is it's being used to control other things these days too, like lighting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So basically, it's used as a signaling protocol now.
Well, the thing is, I was going to say, the thing is, you're recording the source code, if you will. So if you come up with a better guitar synth, that old file will sound.
It'll sound better. Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, you can buy an $80,000 mixing console brand new, and it will have MIDI as a control feature, so that you can sync up your mixing console to whatever
Right,
you want.
right. You can use MIDI to control lights. You can use MIDI to control your audio processors in your rack, right? You can use a foot pedal to switch off. Yeah, it used to be in the old days, if you were a guitarist, you had a bunch of foot pedals that were all actual physical pedals with different effects, like your distortion and your flange and your reverb and your echo. Now your foot pedal is just a controller that you're pulling up different program numbers, that because everything is running through a digital sound processor now, so you no longer have all the analog pedals, but they're still using a foot pedal that's just basically typing in different number sequences to pull up a certain sound combination on their rack. So MIDI is still being used in a lot of other ways to control things besides just the very direct thing we're going to be showing off today, which is playing a note on a keyboard and recording that note and having it played back on the keyboard. That's like the direct correlation of input, output, and music, but there's so many other things that MIDI does as well that aren't as easy to quantify between I pressed the middle C on a grand piano and I heard it play back and it sounded like a piano, so.
Yeah, and the nice thing about MIDI too, because it's recording the note specifics like the pitch, the inflection, bends, etc. You can assign a different instrument and then just instantly. So let's say you recorded a multi-track song and you've got an acoustic guitar sound, and all of a sudden I want that to be a ukulele, for example. You can actually just assign the new patch to it, saying, okay, this entire track you're going to play with this new ukulele sound, and you don't have to re-record it or anything else. The timing, everything you did before is exactly the same as it was. You just can instantly switch the instruments between different instruments.
Right.
Actually, just before the guys get into it too, I've got a question to throw out there, which may get answered during the course of the demos, or maybe we just think about it or shut it down. But I always wondered if you could use Logic to control MIDI. So in other words, if you had a bit banger to MIDI cable or an interface, could you actually drive that from BASIC? Could you write a BASIC program that might poke or whatever to write your own MIDI control code? I know it must be able to be done, but I'm just sort of, because you can't really use MIDI software to you can record what you want to record, but you can't actually write some simple code to, I don't know, turn your lights on and off. I'd love to know if anybody's done that.
You need to write a MIDI driver.
Yeah, it'd be a really cool thing to do, I think, to get some use out of MIDI packs that isn't just music.
Are you saying just be able to from like a CoCo Basic be able to send out MIDI commands? Is that what you're suggesting?
There's a simple example would be, how would I play the note C from BASIC out the MIDI port? But equally that could be, how do I send a MIDI code that controls another device and turn a light off?
From BASIC, from Deck B or whatever, yes, it's absolutely possible. Receiving commands are challenging because they could come in very quickly, and BASIC might not be fast enough to read them. But MIDI commands on sending information out is absolutely possible, even within BASIC. And in fact, pretty much every computer system, no matter what speed it runs at, should be absolutely possible to send properly formatted MIDI signals, even from a very slow BASIC function. So that would open absolutely...
up that'd be an amazing topic to kind of open up the world of controlling external devices, I think.
And under Nitrous 9 there is a MIDI driver. So you just take like Basic 09, for example, you just open the path to the port, the MIDI/MIDI port, and you can just start pumping stuff out with print or Butch or whatever. So you can definitely do it from both operating systems.
And MIDI itself, the actual data protocol itself, is actually quite a straightforward serial digital protocol. The most important thing, obviously, with MIDI is the timing. 31.25 kilohertz, I think, is the operating frequency of MIDI, and that's the critical point. You've got to make sure your timing is spot on, otherwise other instruments won't recognize it if the timing's wrong.
True, but if you have like most of the time, what makes that possible though is the pack itself, right? So the pack makes sure that timing is all taken care of, and then the only thing that else you need to worry about is I'm sure most MIDI instruments will discard a partial MIDI packet, right? MIDI is not just a single byte. MIDI is a it's a sequence of bytes. So the keyboard, for instance, if you want to play a note or a controller like Steve is describing that turns on a light or whatever, I'm sure those have some sort of fail-safe that says, okay, I received part of a MIDI packet, but then like 2 seconds have passed and I haven't received the rest of it, so I'm gonna just throw it away, right? Because it's been too long and something must happen. Somebody must have pulled a cord or whatever. So you do need to send them, before a timeout occurs. But as far as the, as long as you have the pack itself or a cartridge like that itself, then the 31.25 kilohertz is set in the pack and it'll clean everything up for you. Then it's just a matter of sending the right byte out.
Yeah.
I wouldn't try writing a basic program to drive MIDI through the bit banger. I mean, that you'll pretty well need a semi language to get it going that fast.
Yeah, I was thinking, how cool would it be, like if I've got a external multi-track recorder, right? So how cool will it be if I had my CoCo 3 sitting at my desk, and to drop the recorder into record, I could just hit the space bar on my CoCo. That would be a really simple. If I could output through a MIDI pack the right codes, I could program my own controls from the CoCo keyboard, play, record, fast forward, all that sort of stuff just by pressing keys on my color computer. That would be cool.
Yep. Yeah, you can do that with SysXs.
Yeah.
For whatever it's worth, on our old serial port, we tried to hit MIDI baud with the same crystal as we were using for serial stuff, and it just didn't quite work. We'd have to go to a 24 megahertz crystal to divide it right, and then some of the serial bauds didn't work, so it just kind of never worked out for us.
You're right, though. It does have I have another product for another platform that does both. It'll do regular serial as well as MIDI, and it does require a very, very high megahertz crystal in order to divide it down. And there are small discrepancies, but the MIDI protocol is somewhat forgiving. It's like 31.180 to 31.390 or something kilohertz is all possible and usable within the error tolerance for the MIDI protocol. So you do have a little bit of wiggle room, but you're right. It is challenging to get everything to work. And I'm not exactly sure why the historical on using such an interesting baud rate that was not anything like any of the other rates used for contemporary modems or anything like that at the time, but it's a standard, so that's what we have.
It's a pretty amazing standard too. I think, was it 1983? I think that they officially released it, and here we are in 2020, and we're still using the same protocol.
Yeah.
In professional circles, we use it all the time.
Right.
All right. Well, I want to hear something. We've been talking about MIDI. Let's hear some MIDI. Who's gonna?
Why don't we do this, Stevie? Let me play a couple of videos, and prepackaged. What do you think?
That sounds good.
All right. Let's do something where we show in CoCo MIDI 2 how you can choose an instrument that may not have been the original one that was chosen. So let's share system sound, and we're going to hold on.
Sorry, I was getting impatient, but thank you.
No. All righty, here we go. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yep. All right, let's listen to a little Small World. Can you hear that?
Unfortunately, yes.
We're gonna build up, Stevie, to things that are more impressive. You see, we got to start somewhere. You don't want to start at 10. So that one, this is a CoCo MIDI 2, and I just loaded. It's a Small World after all, and I chose brass section on my Yamaha MX88. So let's.
And that's a CoCo 1 and 2 program, we should point out, and it will actually handle up to 16 tracks on a MIDI pack.
Yeah, the only thing that can make that song worse was to hear the polka version like we just did there. Thanks, Rob.
I know. I just think of Disneyland.
Yeah, I think my T count just went down. So yeah.
Let's
thanks.
go. Let's go to another one. Okay. This is me doing some knob fiddling.
Now that's my jam right there.
Bit of Axel F there.
Yeah.
Of course, this can sound totally different on your synthesizer of choice.
You can hear some of the effects there too, like the pitch bends and stuff.
Portamento.
Yeah.
I like the fact that it shows live on the keyboard too what keys are being hit, so you can actually learn to play the song while watching it.
That sounded cool. Nice and crunchy.
Yep. Yeah, and then so let's we'll take a step back. No, let's take a step forward and show you a little bit of Flight of the Bumblebee. And I chose a certain performance on my Yamaha that.
So right now, this is being played on your actual musical keyboard. It's being driven by this program and the CoCo on your keyboard.
It
right?
was when it was recorded to video.
Yes. Okay.
Yep. Yes, exactly.
Cool stuff.
So let's show something with CoCo MIDI Pro with many tracks and with kind of a randomly selected settings on my Yamaha.
Interesting. Interesting take.
Yeah, and you can play around with that. And
I
then
really like the percussion track on that.
Damn it, you made my ears bleed.
Sorry, Simon.
And then I really wanted to get Ultimuse working, and it turned out it was working fine and ease of use. There was a file that had to be deleted. We'll certainly help you offline with that. But once I got it working, I had a lot of files to go through. So I thought, well, what if I could play some Shanghai or King's Quest and other kind of games while I was going through music kind of in the background. And this is a little bit of what I was up to. And I'm here in Ultimuse on the video.
Okay.
And this is the song I picked out. I'm going to go and just hit the play key here. And we're going to hear some music starting, some nice little piano music. But let's go play some Thexter.
This is what this music makes.
Why not?
Dramatic Thexter.
Yes, and now I don't have the system sound of the CoCo piped in, but it also plays at the same time. And I think I'm going to play some chess. Because I'm starting to really get into this music track. Well, let's fire up some Shanghai Basic 09. But you know what? I don't think that's enough. I feel like I'm just a real good multitasker. So I'm just going to start a game of King's Quest and pick up where I left off on King's Quest 3. Just check in to see how much memory. Oh, look, a megabyte left. A lot going on this CoCo 3.
MIDI timing staying impressively tight.
That's one big advantage of using the hardware pack versus the bit banger. You tend to lose the timing a lot more multitasking with the bit banger.
Yeah, no doubt.
And the wizard's yelling at me here, but the music keeps playing. I just have to hit clear.
That is impressive.
Yeah.
I should mention here too, he's not running Thexter at full speed either. He's using the default 3 speed setting. There's options to actually speed it up if you wanted it to run a bit faster.
I'm really impressed with the MIDI timing on that, running in the background, that it hasn't missed a beat.
I was impressed by the trash can that you had there.
Yeah, if only we could stick someone in it.
That's a good comeback.
Dave with a comeback. Look at that.
Are you offering?
So then I can go back and I can start playing more files or select different images on the SDC, and you know, away I go. I believe I've heard there's a jukebox function or a way to kind of keep the tracks going, so you don't have to keep going back and choosing new songs. But I haven't found that yet. But it was pretty.
I think Brian will be able to help explain that.
Yeah.
Now the keyboard. What keyboard are you outputting to again, Rob?
Yamaha MX88.
Now is that general MIDI standard?
It's I don't know if it is configured to, you know, what would happen if you played general MIDI files through, because we're playing Ultimuse files and we're playing, you know, files that are specifically.
No, but you're familiar with the general MIDI standard though, where you have this 127 instruments. You know, grand pianos are the first half dozen and stuff.
I don't know the answer to that.
But
it has one. Yeah, it has an XG mode, which is like it's like an enhanced GM.
Okay. Yeah, the first MIDI thing I became aware of home computer wise was when you showed that King's Quest game. So Sierra was always pushing the envelope on computer music, right? So they started on the Tandy 1003 voice music, then they got into like the Ad-Lib synthesizer, which was an 11 voice FM synthesis based on like a Yamaha chip, which is like the predecessor to the Sound Blaster. But they also supported MIDI, and some of the early Sierra games where that you had to get a MIDI instrument, and it was a Roland. I don't remember the exact number of the Roland, but it was Roland MT301 or 32. MT32, right? So they were driving that Roland, and that thing has become kind of like one of the dominant things. But that was pre-General MIDI. So the whole thing about General MIDI, if anybody's not familiar with MIDI, was that before the General MIDI standard, whoever made a keyboard, instrument one may or may not have been grand piano. It could have been a banjo. It could have been, electric piano. So General MIDI just said, we're going to have standard values for different instrument numbers. So like 0 through 7 were different variations of analog pianos. And then we got into our electric pianos and our harpsichords and stuff. So it was just a way to standardize the instruments. So anybody could have made a General MIDI compliant one, but everybody's organ would have sounded different, like Korg organs. The Korg synthesizers always had a really good Hammond rock organ sound, and Yamahas were known for their grand piano sound. So every synth, different manufacturers specialize in one thing over the other, but Roland was one of the first ones that I think kind of got people into controlling these things through computers and stuff. So I think that kind of set some precedents just from my own memories and experiences,
That evolved into a thing called the Sound Canvas, which is like a really high quality version of the MT32. And
okay.
And that was the thing. Yeah,
they were good. We back in the day when all that stuff was being standardized and such, I worked for a music workshop in Geelong at the time, and we hired out a lot of stuff, equipment, studio gear and PA gear and all the rest of it. And general MIDI stuff got a lot of use from people doing karaoke stuff back then.
Yeah.
You'd use karaokes with MIDI files and sing along with it. And it was generally very, very cheesy, but some of them are less cheesy than others.
Yeah. Brian, the music man. Are you going to treat us to some music today, sir?
Oh, I can certainly do that.
And by the way, Rob, thanks for putting that together. Those videos. It sounded good, man.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. I got stuff more or less queued up and all that. Right back here, I've got a CoCo 2 sitting on keyboard, and that set up with Lyra. 2.62 is the version for the CoCo 1 and 2. You have to have 64K on it. Let me switch my screen here real quick.
Lyra, pants on fire. Uh-oh, you went dark on us. There we go.
Yeah, no, I'm here. For some reason, I got the scene is just not setting up correctly, but you can still see the screen.
I see you, and I see Lyra. The MIDI music.
And it is Lyra.
That's Lyra on CoCo 2. Unfortunately, it's grainy because I don't have a proper video capture card. So you're actually looking at it through my webcam. So I apologize ahead of time for the grainy, crappy. Fine. But anyway, let me switch up a different microphone here.
So you're really fancy there with your scroll on the bottom there in different colors and everything. So right now the track we're hearing is called The Sounds of Silence.
Well, sorry about that, guys. For some reason, my webcam doesn't want to pick up the audio.
Well, while you're doing that, Brian, so it is Lyra, not Lyra. I don't know why it looks like Lyra to me.
I've heard it pronounced both ways, and I honestly don't remember how Cecil or Lester Hands actually pronounced it at the show anymore, so I can't remember what the proper pronunciation is.
Lyra.
Yeah, it's interesting. Lyra sort of just lyrics, and Lyra sort of, the lyre, the instrument, the stringed instrument, like a MIDI harp.
You know, I was just thinking that since, like, with the MS
when you start doing that.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, we hear you, Brian.
Yeah.
All right, you might hear a little bit of an echo and all that, but yeah, no, this is running on a CoCo 2 with a mouse.
Okay, the screen is just updated.
Yeah. And, on my video that I showed this off on, it automatically detects that there's a MIDI pack. And that's what already shows up. Otherwise, it'd show CoCo serial.
Okay.
And that, so. Okay. And just loading a song here.
And this is coming off of CoCo 2.
Yeah.
Yep, this is on a CoCo 2.
Which is impressive.
And I've got, several different songs here.
Billie Jean.
Let's beat it a little bit.
Oh, beat it.
There we go. I'll fire up the Fairlight and we can play the intro.
Do it. Nice lag.
Are you hearing that?
No. It sounds great.
No. Sounds great. Sounds like what's going on between David Ladd's ears right now. So.
The signal to noise ratio is fantastic.
Very clean.
Yeah.
Who's just confirming it's Lyra?
Not working right, and I don't know why.
Well, if you want, I can try to stall for time, Brian, and maybe I can just show people how to start.
I've got it now. It was my MIDI patch.
It's an inferior product.
I've got your back.
Yeah, I've got that. That's the thing about with the.
Where did
is
he
it coming
go?
through?
No. Oh wait, faintly.
Yeah.
Very quietly.
Now, you were also messing with your levels before the show, too. So you had music playing that we could hear, but we asked you to bring your level up before. Is that still... You got all your...
Oh, it worked in rehearsal.
Yeah. Beat it, yeah.
There we go.
So anyway, it works. I generally don't use Lyra myself. I use mostly Ultramuse. And one thing that I noticed, Rob, is that you said that the CoCo can't do MIDI files off the internet. I beg
Not
to
all.
differ.
Not all. Not. This is according to Bill Pierce.
You are both correct and incorrect. You cannot really do unmodified.
That's right.
MIDI files from off the internet. they need to be saved as a MIDI format 0.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to use MF play, you need to be sure that you convert it ahead of time. And I can just show that on the CoCo 3 side of things.
What keyboard are we outputting to right now back there, Brian?
I'm sorry, did you say something, Steve?
Yeah, I said what keyboard were you outputting to?
Okay, there we go. Actually, off my rack.
Okay, so that's a MIDI synthesizer in a box. There's no physical keys to that.
This is the TG300 by Yamaha.
Okay.
MU90R, and then a TG33. These two here are General MIDI, the TG33. That is what is not General MIDI. It's what's known as an octo bank setup, where you actually have 8 banks of 8.
Okay. Yeah, and so if you're not, and again, I'm no musician, but I have owned different things in the past like this. So if you're not familiar with the fact that a synthesizer is not necessarily going to have the keys like a piano, you can buy synthesizers that are just in a box, right? So basically a synthesizer is a chip or a series of chips that generates all the different instrument noises. So it is not uncommon to have, especially in the world of MIDI, to have certain synthesizers that are just boxes that have all the chips and stuff inside them. And then we just have our MIDI cables that go into those boxes that then trigger those instruments to play through there. I've had a couple of different boxes, and I've had some daughter boards that I used to plug into Sound Blaster cards. I've had some Korg synthesizers that would actually plug right into my Sound Blaster card that had the MIDI synthesizer chip on it. So there's a lot of things that make up a synthesizer, but not all synthesizers have actual keyboards on them.
Yes, and that was actually how a speech system sold them, because I mean back then keyboards were fairly expensive for a full MIDI synth.
Yeah.
So they had the option of just buying the synthesizer like in a little box like Brian has for like $70, whereas a keyboard version might cost several hundred.
And the other thing too, when you're using MIDI to play songs, like a lot of 80s stuff was mostly MIDI, and they play the MIDI file off a computer, whether it be an Amiga or CoCo or whatever it be. I'm talking about studio systems, and you might have like 16 channels or more of instruments playing at the same time. And so to have that in keyboard instruments with keyboards and everything it chews up a lot of space really quickly. Whereas with MIDI, and running what they call modules, you could have a whole setup of different synthesizers in one rack, run all your MIDI to that, and have a complex, intricate array of different sources from different manufacturers that had the best sounds in certain areas, and combine everything together to get what you want.
And I have a funny feeling that's what Darren Ottery will be demonstrating on the next episode.
So I'm going to ask the question, and if the answer is too technical, we can save it because we don't want this to be a deep dive today. But I know MIDI has MIDI in and MIDI out, right? So on my computer, if I want to control a synthesizer that's external to the computer, I would be going on the MIDI out from my computer to the MIDI in of that device. And by the same token, if I had a keyboard that I wanted to record notes into my computer, I would take the MIDI out from my keyboard to go to the MIDI in on my computer. So we're kind of crossing over the input and the output. So far, I'm speaking logically, right?
Yep.
Now, I also noticed that a lot of devices also have what's called a MIDI through, which is kind of like a pass-through where you could potentially daisy chain more than one MIDI device, right? So some devices, and that's what Jim Brain's cartridge has, right? It has MIDI in, MIDI out, and MIDI through. What I am curious of, and again, if the answer is too technical, I understand that there's a value for what instrument I want to play, and I understand there's a value for what note I want to play, and those are just basically numeric. But how would I say I want to play the grand piano instrument, but I want to play it on an actual synthesizer that's 3 boxes down in my daisy chain? How do you specify a device? Is there basically a device ID that would go in front of the note ID? Where I could say I've got 3 different synths, and I got one synth that's really good for grand piano sounds, and I want to play all my grand pianos on that synthesizer box, but I want to play my organs on my other box because it's got good organ sounds. So there's a way to, through the MIDI in, out, and through, to also specify which synthesizer I want to play a certain thing on.
I can take this if you want.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Darren.
Yeah, so and this relates to general MIDI as well. If you think about general MIDI is just the equivalent of a virtual rack of external synthesizers. If you've got a room of synthesizers, well, that's what general MIDI is on a chip. It's a bunch of synthesizers. So they're all using different MIDI channels. The MIDI channel is the key. So if I go over to the synthesizer behind me, which let's say is grand piano, the one on the top is grand piano, and I set that synthesizer to receive on MIDI channel 8.
Oh, so you assign a channel to the instrument.
Correct. You go around all your instruments and you change the MIDI receive channel. Then when I play out of the software, anything that's on channel 8 will play on that instrument that's set to receive on channel 8. So you could record on channel 1 and then go into the software and change that track to be outputting on channel 8, or you could set the instrument that you're playing into the MIDI recorder to be on channel 8, and therefore it would already take that MIDI stream as channel 8. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, yeah.
So to use kind of like a SCSI analogy, you're assigning a device ID to a certain drive in the chain.
Yeah, kind of, except MIDI is all about channels. You hear the number 16. There's 16 MIDI channels. There's actually more. There's a way to get more than 16, but the vanilla platform has 16 channels, and basically because MIDI records everything that it hears, it's designed to, if you record it on channel 2, it'll receive it as channel 2, and then it will play it back as channel 2, unless you change it. So it's sort of like, it's not really like SCSI. It's more like, it's just a built-in feature of the way MIDI works. Is the simple thing. So for example, in general MIDI, drums are always channel 10, and the idea was that if I wrote a general MIDI track and sent it to David and he played it back on his machine, it might not sound exactly the same, but it would be close, right? You know, the drums would come out on channel 10. And his device, if he's got a general MIDI device, would already be set up to play that back. So you might just do a bit of tweaking, but essentially get a very similar sounding song. A lot of the time people go on the internet and download a MIDI file, and they play it back and they go, wow, that's crazy. That doesn't even sound anything like, you know, the song that it's supposed to be. It's probably because all the MIDI channel numbers are all jumbled up. That would be a good place to start, assuming that the person who made it knew what they were doing.
Right.
So a lot of the time you would just pull it apart and change the MIDI channels, and suddenly you'd have a nice sounding track.
So does that mean, let me ask you this, so does that mean all your instruments are kind of listening at the same time, and they're going to basically say, oh, he's wanting to play channel 8, I'm not on channel 8, so I'm going to ignore those notes and let him play them?
Think about a conductor in an orchestra. Mm-hmm. It's like the instrument on channel 8 is just waiting for its stream of MIDI data. It's hearing all the MIDI data, but it's not going to play until it hears 8. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Because I've never messed with more than one MIDI device at a time. My comprehension has been a direct one-to-one relationship where it's this keyboard or this box and this computer, and I had this thing doing everything on this thing. I've never had more than one thing to conceive before, so I was just trying to understand that.
General MIDI is you kind of have been in a way, because general MIDI is exactly that. It's like 16 synthesizers sitting there, receiving different channel numbers.
So it's really one general MIDI synth is like 16 synths.
Yeah.
Now I have a question. Oh, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that workstations like my Yamaha SY77 and SY99, they have they're what they call multi-timbral, and the general MIDI, like the Roland sound canvas and all the rest, they're what they call multi-timbral, which means they've got multiple synthesizers in the one box. So say, for example, my SY77's got a sequencer built into it. It's got 16 tracks. It's got a drum track on the last track, and you can assign any instrument to any particular track on the sequencer. But you can then control that from a CoCo. You might tell the CoCo to play, like Darren was saying, drums on channel 10, and then that might go out to a drum part on the SY77 or 99. But the one synthesizer can play all the parts, basically, because it'll be multi-timbral, which means it's got multiple synthesizers in the one box.
Yeah. And Nick Marentes, you said you had a question?
Yes. Now, just trying to understand about this MIDI through. Now, on the MIDI card, that Jim's got. It's got a MIDI in, MIDI out. Okay, I can understand that. MIDI out goes directly to the synthesizer, and MIDI in comes in from the synthesizer. How does the MIDI through works? I know it's a pass-through, but I would have thought the pass-through should be on the synthesizer. So you send out from the card, it goes to the synthesizer, then the synthesizer should have a through. How does the MIDI through work on the cartridge? Why is there a through on the cartridge?
For MIDI in. So
well, that's right. Yeah.
So, but that was the answer. So the MIDI out on the cartridge, goes to, let's take the simple example. You have a cartridge and you have the synthesizer. So MIDI out on the cartridge goes to MIDI in on the synthesizer. And then there's also a MIDI through typically on synthesizers. So that signal would then go into the MIDI through signal on the synthesizer and then could go out to another device, and you can chain them along, right?
Okay.
The same is true on the cartridge itself. If you think of the cartridge as something that's going to receive MIDI signals, so the MIDI in on the so let's say you're playing the synthesizer and you're trying to record notes on the CoCo, but then you want to actually hear the notes on another synthesizer. So there's another device.
So the MIDI through would go to like an output.
That's right. So that would that's where you'd put that MIDI through, and you'd hook it over there, and then you'd hook it to that other synthesizer. The problem is, at the very beginning, and I realize I'm not speaking as authoritatively as the musicians on here, but from a technology perspective, a keyboard and a synthesizer were at one point they were two different things. The keyboard was used to input the notes, but it didn't play anything necessarily. And then there was another box which would actually produce the sounds, and that was the synthesizer. But for years, everybody has only seen them packaged in one unit, right? Right. The keyboard has the synthesizer fit right in it as well. But technically, that's how you think about it. You have to think about them as two separate things. And then, now just to note, a bunch of the designs, I don't know if the original Glenside design did this, but a lot of the more contemporary designs, including this one, you can reassign the MIDI through to be a second MIDI out. So you can, if you want to send the same stream to two different synthesizers, let's say a keyboard and a drum machine, let's say, from the CoCo, you have the option of, in the cartridge, you can change a jumper, and then you have two MIDI out.
So you can kind of simulcast the output.
That's right. That's right. Because not every MIDI device. I mean, I assume if you're a somebody that does MIDI a lot, you probably have ways to split and daisy chain MIDI devices. But kind of a poor man's way of doing that, if you just have two devices and they don't have MIDI through ports on them, is you could use that MIDI through port as a second MIDI out.
Right.
The other thing that did was, I was just going to say, the other thing that second port does is that you could actually get in the software, you could set it up as port B, and therefore now you've got 32 MIDI channels. So
that's the answer to my next question. I was going to ask, are they two separate outputs, or are they basically parallel outputs?
Software dependent.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Yeah, the other thing I think it allows too, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that you could actually have, like, playing keyboard. Let's say you bought a really cheap synth with pretty crappy built-in sounds, but has a keyboard on it. You could actually use the MIDI in to record off the keyboard and simultaneously send it through the MIDI through to another synth to play it with
That's what I used to do, because I had a crappy Casio keyboard where its instruments sucked, but it was MIDI, so I used the keys as my input controller, and I was playing to my Korg on my PC. So yeah.
The only thing with MIDI through to understand too is that there's a delay. So it's very small. It's a small delay, but in the world of MIDI, I would probably not go more than 2 or 3 steps through the through port before I'd expect to. You wouldn't hear the delay as a real delay. You just kind of think, oh, it's just not in time. It's not quite in time. We're talking about milliseconds, but by the time you get to the 3rd or 4th device, you can start to really feel it, and it'll ruin your groove. So you kind of use a MIDI splitter instead to kind of send off in parallel.
Gotcha.
I would say I mean, from a technology perspective, that is, I can't argue that may indeed be true on this, and on this interface at least. There's no delay on the MIDI through port because it is exactly what you're describing. It's a MIDI splitter essentially inside the box. So there's no delay there. But yeah, a lot of them would do kind of a store and forward. Oh, I read a byte from the data stream. Oh, I need to send it out the other side. Well, the time it took to read it and then send it would be the delay in some devices through MIDI through a channel.
Yeah, there's in a lot
the
of
other thing that
measure-
happens. The other thing that happens too with the a lot of MIDI through, it's not so. It might not necessarily be the actual delay from actual processing of the MIDI data, but what can happen? They usually use an optocoupler to couple the outputs so that they're isolated, but still got the same data on them. And you can have it can even just be the delay of the electronics themselves. If you start daisy chaining them enough, even if they're supposed to be direct copies, you, like Darren said, you do notice it. And it's especially if you're playing fast solos and things like that, it just doesn't feel right. You think, did I play that really that loosely? And when
could it even be like a resistance delay if you got all the cabling going through all these things?
It would. You know, cable through cable is a fraction of the speed of light, and you're right. There is an optocoupler in each one of the MIDI devices because that's part of the standard. So definitely, if you go, I'm saying it depends on how the MIDI through is implemented. 2 devices might be okay, but yeah, if you got 20 devices in your, 16, I guess, so you have 16 devices in one chain, and each one's assigned to a different channel. My assumption is that if you've got enough interest to have 16 different devices to play MIDI, then you probably have a MIDI splitter, and you're not going to use MIDI.
Is that like David Ladd and the 16-slot MPI at this point? So
that's it.
And an unhappy wife.
Yeah. Right. So I want to hear some more music. Who's got some music we can hear?
Well, Stevie, if you want to go to my screen for a second, I'm just showing how the MIDI channels are broken out in Ultimuse.
All right, please do, Rob Inman.
Yeah, just a visual. Again, Brian would have to comment on this because this is my 3rd time using Ultimuse, but you can see the 16 channels there, and you would assign those to different channels, different parts, different channels, and then Bill Pierce has said he plans on increasing that to 32.
Interesting. So the neat thing about a program like this that gives you the musical staffs is even if you didn't know how to play, if you could transcribe music, you could take a sheet music like in a book, because there's plenty of books of sheet music, and you could transcribe music from a printed page to your computer and get the notes in the right spot and hand note these things and then play it back. And I think Brian Schubring, you've actually done that, haven't you? Haven't you transcribed lots of music into it through here?
I done quite a bit through Ultramuse, and that I've taken some songs from just straight sheet music, and scribed it in, and the piece that's showing right now is was done by Mike Carey out of Tennessee, and he actually moused it in from memory, Stars and Stripes Forever, all the bits and pieces. And all that.
And this is one of the ones you play at CoCo Fest and stuff, right?
Exactly, yeah. Once the anthems get played, then yes, then I play that.
Now here I can see 8 ports, 9. Okay, there's my 16 ports. Although the G, I'm not sure what the hell the G is. Isn't?
Yep.
Right.
16.
Oh, because we're not starting on 0. I'm thinking in hexadecimals, 0 through 9, A through F. I'm like, where the hell is the G? All right, I'm caught up. Now, where do you say I want instrument 12 to be in channel 1 or whatever?
I have no idea.
Right there. Correct.
Okay, so the numbers to the right MIDI of there. Okay, so that's MIDI channel. So the +1 is what channel it's in. So port 1 is on channel 1 and D is on channel 1. So right now, most of these are playing some variation of a piano.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just changed the channel for D to 5.
Okay.
I'm not sure which stream we're actually showing on the stream right now, Rob's or Brian's.
I'm showing Rob's right now, full screen.
Okay.
Okay.
So
okay.
Before, if you're waiting, if you want to order Jim's pack and you could figure out, how to use DriveWire. Ultimately does support DriveWire. Talk to Mikey or a DriveWire expert. But since we're on the screen, I'll just show you that if you go into modes, this is what you want. You want to unselect /MIDI, and you want to select MIDI pack if you have Jim Brain's product. If you don't have Jim Brain's product and you're using the Bitbanger, you select rear serial.
Okay. So are you going to be able, I know you're showing us right now, but can you actually play something right now from here too so we can hear it?
If I share, I have to share system sound, I think. Here. Share screen, share computer sound. That's
so we're looking at Ultimuse now, are we? Or
yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So we selected our MIDI pack.
Yes.
And I'm going to change this channel back to 1 because I don't know what it did. If you get some files loaded into ease of use, I don't know if there's files already there, but you'll be able to click on files and read score file. You'll have a bunch of options. I'm certainly open to
Beat me? What the hell is beat me? I'm afraid to ask.
Well, most of them are kind of old-timey tracks, but if I click on Beat Me, it's just telling me if we're in a different version. It tells you that every single one you load. It's saying, "Beat me, Daddy, 8 to the bar."
Okay, I'm intrigued. Hopefully the song lives up to the title.
Bit of trivia there. The person that keyed that in, Alan Dages, used to run the CoCo Fest in Atlanta.
Oh, there you go. A.R. Dages.
The Yamaha. There's you go. So let's hear it.
Just before we hit play, you can use these arrow keys, and obviously,
you can scroll through it. So it scrolls a page at a time and not like a staff at a time, huh?
That's right.
Okay, or note at a time. There you go. Beat me, Daddy. I've been naughty.
Are you hearing anything?
Yeah.
Yep.
Is it loud enough?
Yeah, crank it up a little bit.
See if I can do that.
It's got a boogie woogie feel to it, yeah.
There's a 12-bar blues there.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't know how to crank it up, but
that's
anyway,
fine. We hear it. We hear it.
Obviously,
yeah.
You can obviously change that. That's
Brian's got some demos. I'm sure he can crank up. So
you can change it to
saxophone,
adjust the volume, change it to organs. You can select a performance and see what that does.
So what are you playing that off there, Rob? What's the module?
This is the Yamaha MX88 synth.
Oh yeah, of course. You said that earlier.
So you're just changing the instruments on your actual keyboard right now, right?
Yep.
Yep, and you can do that from within Ultimuse too. So
you can.
That's changed.
Cool. Neat.
And of course, you can just hit clear, and then just hit break. Anytime you want to stop, it's waiting for the break key.
Now you're just showing off. Okay.
Speaking of showing off, Brian, I'm sure, has got some demos to do too.
All right, Brian.
Yeah, I'm here. I've been listening, and that sounds good, Rob. And that.
Blow us away, man. I want my ears to bleed, music, man. Come on, crank it up.
You want
Come
your
on.
ears to bleed,
Yeah, man. Play some Skinner, man. Come on. Free bird.
Free bird! That's loud enough for you? Anyway, that's Stars Stripes Forever, of course, and
this shows a complexity. I mean, you've got all 16 channels running. You've got the percussion staff on there showing, the drum tracks and.
Yeah, Mike Carey moused this all in, and he's got. Let's go to the instrument table here, and he originally set it up for the MT32. I went through and repatched it to to work with the TG33 because it has nicer sounds.
Okay.
In my opinion, a little bit, for the orchestral instruments and such. And one of the things that you notice that in front of all that, you see a 0. It's actually the letter O. They look both the same on Ultramus and that. And it's for a device that has an octal bass instrument, for bank and such. You have to, in Ultramuse, precede it with the letter O so that Ultramuse knows that it's actually an octal bass, so that it knows that bank 3, instrument 5, bank 7, instrument 2. And that. So that's how Yamaha set up, or actually several different instruments had it set up with that used the octal scheme for the instruments and such. So I wanted to point that out for someone who does want to use an older synthesizer, and that uses an octal bank scheme in that. And I think there's 1 or 2 other ways for identifying other odd banks and such, but some of them are a little bit weird, and you actually have to use sysx commands to actually switch banks, which is a bit exotic and not very logical. But you can. What was that?
So Ultimuse works. It does record and play and edit sysx as well.
It does not record. This is a music editor. I can go around and just make sure. Go out. I can pick up a note, place it, if it ever locks in on one of the lines. It's not working, but you can actually take, I know for a fact I can't do this, you can take and split a note. You're supposed to be able to split a note.
Live demos are fun.
Yeah, computers are fun. Yeah, but yeah, you can go through. You can take and edit notes, and actually mouse it in, from a piece of score. In that.
So Ultimuse is basically a score editor and player. Then.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Kind of like a composer. It's not a recorder. It's more of a composer.
Exactly. It's a composer. That is absolutely correct.
So you do something like CoCo MIDI Pro if you wanted to record sysx or something in real time. Yeah.
All right. Let me check here. General MIDI 1.5. Change my MIDI patch. There we go. And, I've got a whole bunch. All the songs that this is actually MIDI box. This is just a front end that I wrote that for MF Play. I don't know if you can really read it right up here.
Yeah, but AC/DC, TNT, and American Woman, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, MF Play was written in. He started it in '88, but finished up in '91 by Paul Signora, I think is how you pronounce his last name, and he came up with a scheme that actually uses a modified format of a MIDI file. It compresses, compacts, removes all the extra bits and bytes that aren't needed to play a score, and so you start with a MIDI file from off the internet. You need to make sure that it's saved as a MIDI format 0 format, and then if you have like Cakewalk, Sonar, whatever, something like that, you can actually tweak it up a little bit, and as long as you save it as a format 0, you can then go on the CoCo. You can move it over to the CoCo onto a disk image and such, and just convert it to a CMF 0 format, which is a compact MIDI format 0, and you come out with all these different songs. And all this is just a list of all the different songs I just simply can tag and play. So
can you play Respect by Aretha?
I certainly can.
What you want, baby, I got it. What you need.
That's right.
I got a lot. All I'm asking for Just a little respect, baby.
Okay.
Just
so
a little bit.
respect? Okay, little respect. Okay.
Just a little bit.
Oh, yes.
And so we're going to just play that right off.
What you want, baby, I got it. What you need, motherfucker.
You know I got it.
All I'm asking for.
The music sounds great, but the voice synthesis is horrible.
Yeah, I know. Someone really needs to
Just a little
bit that vocal track.
Just
Where's
a
the
little
speak
bit.
sound pack when we need him?
Oh, yeah, you
What
can
you
really
want.
hear that. Speech sound back trying to sing. Yeah.
Oh, that's all we need. We need to synthesize that next, right? So,
I'm
So-
going to do that.
That was playing off your. That was playing the instruments on your equipment.
Yeah, that was actually playing the music off the MU90R.
Wow.
I actually have the nice thing with that. It's actually two synthesizers in one box, so it's actually a 32 channel unit based off of two banks of 16 channels.
And just as a recollection here, we are using the Midi Maestro, created by Retro Innovations.
We are using the Midi Maestro. I'm using my old pack.
that Midi Maestro
on the
comes
CoCo
from Jim Brain Enterprises, right? So that was
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
Retro Innovations.
Yes.
Yeah. Now he did an outstanding job. It's more specific than in timing wise than the older packs because the design.
Check is in the mail.
Now, Brian, were you influential in the what Jim ended up releasing? Did you have any input on that based on the original design and feature requests and stuff?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about redoing the pack again. You know, that I had done for the club.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was looking for was the schematic because I couldn't find it. And I finally got it, and it was sent to me through the internet. I think through Facebook. And Jim got a hold of it, and he sent me the schematics, and says and whatnot. And I says, Jim, let's run with it, and you have fun. So we just collaborated, and did some discussion saying, well, we could, go with, he said, more modern parts to make it more reliable, also a little more cost effective. And one of the key aspects of the original MIDI pack is that it was using a couple inverters gates to create the oscillator for the clock. And you have a couple resistor capacitor to set up the timing of it. That can be fairly precise. And when you count it down and stuff, from off of with using a crystal, but it was decided that it may be more beneficial to do away with that and go with the actual clock module, and replace that part of the circuit with that. And that really, I think, helped a lot because some of the pieces that I was playing before that were real busy actually seemed more spot on.
Okay.
And such. So that's the one nice thing with MIDI pack, and also the way that he did the MIDI through. The other MIDI packs had in, out, and through, and that as an option, but they weren't able to select. Well, you can have two MIDI out instead of a MIDI through, and that. So that's one of the things that Jim did, and which really makes a lot of sense.
When I think of Jim Brain, I think of the Copacabana. Do you think you could play a little bit of that?
I've got something else for you instead.
Okay. Got your Copacabana right here.
This is your junky guitar sound here.
Okay, let's hear it. No, that sounds like a pretty good acoustic.
Yeah.
12 string.
Who knows the song?
Classical gas.
Classical gas.
Exactly. And it does start to rock.
This sounds a little better than the original 4-voice CoCo version of this that we got.
Yeah.
Just a little. How much
Nice
do you want me
percussion
to
sounds
play?
on it for sure.
Cue the winds.
Hey, Brian, I believe we have a member of our panel that would probably appreciate this. Any way you could maybe play some Down Under?
I was gonna say that almost needed to be segued into Chariots of Fire there, but yeah, Down Under is just as good. Crikey!
The Vegemite song.
Yes.
He just smiled. Give me a piece.
And gave me a Vegemite sandwich.
That's it.
Got any Rob
He said,
Harris?
"You come from a land down under."
Nice one, Nick.
How's that coming through?
Good.
Oh, this reminds me of that commercial for Radio Shack in Australia.
It is too, just like it.
The Donut Dilemma commercial.
Took me in and made me breakfast.
All this running out of CoCo 3, running the ease of use beta 6 on Windows 9.
Available at lcurtisboyle.com.
No, Beta 6 isn't quite available for the public yet. You guys have some preview versions.
Beta 5.
Yeah, you got some good sounding synths there, music man.
Yeah. That's
Neat.
not bad at all.
I have one question for Jim Brain. Is Jim
Yeah.
still there? Here he comes. I noticed on the slideshow you're showing, you're showing the MIDI, the board plugged into a red cartridge at the moment, but you've also got pictures of it plugged into a FD502 case. So, does your MIDI board fit into a CoCo SDC case? You know, you can download files to do your own CoCo SDC cartridge on a 3D printer. So, does the board fit in a CoCo SDC style case?
It would be a little bit short, but if you didn't have the back on it, then you could plug it in. But I do think you could remix the CoCo SDC. As you said, it fits in the case. So the case just needs to be made just slightly shorter. So, but if it's a 3D print, then that should be pretty easy. Just kind of slide the back of the case a little bit closer, and then open up the 3 little holes, and you should have a case. I mean, obviously, there's some folks that are in the community that do 3D printed cases, and it's I'm sure is an easy change to the existing 3D print files in order to do it. So yeah, but I did want to make sure that it would fit in there. So it does. It's a little the CoCo SD case is a little bit too long, but could be easily fixed.
Okay, cool. I might try that when I get my MIDI pack.
And what's the inventory right now like? If people want to buy this today, you have some ready to ship?
I make them up. I make them up as they get orders in, because the volume's been a little low right now. So it takes me usually about a week or so to solder them up. I do them in batches. So if there was a bunch of orders that came in, then I can do it in short order. I've got all the parts here. It's just a matter of soldering them up.
Okay.
Do you have them available as a kit at all?
I do. I have them available as a kit, a finished unit, and then a finished unit with a case.
Okay. What are the prices on the variations?
Yeah, see, that's the one thing I should have looked up. Sorry. Let me look real quick here.
I'm personal friends with the guy who developed this. Would you like me to
Top
put you
of
in
the
touch with
line
him?
is $75.
Okay, so let me grab the thing here. So you can buy it actually 4 ways. You can get the PCB yourself and find all the parts yourself. That's $5. the kit itself is 45, assembled unit 60, and the assembled unit in a case is 75.
Okay, so now, so assembly, obviously that involves surface mount assembly as well, or is it just the through hole?
No, it's all through hole.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at it and see. Oh, yeah, I'm going to get a tiny little. Oh, so the whole lot's through hole. Okay.
Now,
all of it's
too easy.
Is there any ROM on this cartridge at all?
No, there's not. I do have another version of the cartridge that offers a ROM capability. As yet, I wasn't aware of anything that makes sense to load into the ROM that would be appropriate for the MIDI cartridge. But if that changes in the future, then definitely that could be added. It's pretty easy to add.
Real-time clock.
No, I was just thinking, kind of like, how the Orchestra 90 kind of boots up into something that could take advantage of it. If you had some real simple MIDI controller software built into it that was CoCo 123 compatible, that somebody could literally plug a keyboard controller in and a synthesizer out and start playing it through this device, that might be kind of neat. But I don't know if that's that important, because if you're going to do that, you're going to run it through your computer anyway. So,
well, the key there is what I ran into challenge of is, okay, so this primarily would be used as a MIDI kind of out. So you'd be processing some sort of computer file, and then you would be sending it out to a synthesizer. The challenge is the ROM would be able to provide the program to do that, but then you'd still have to have some sort of device in order to load the file necessary to put it, unless you were going to use the actual CoCo as the keyboard. But I highly doubt that somebody would do that if they have a regular piano keyboard sitting nearby.
Well, so let me ask you this. I don't know enough about MIDI, but is this thing, would this be smart? And I guess you wouldn't even need this, because if you had a MIDI controller, you could just take a cable and plug that straight into the MIDI synth and bypass this. But could this kind of passively work even without software on the CoCo? If somebody wanted to plug their controller into this and then have it go out to the synthesizer brain box, would this still work without any software running on the CoCo? As a serial?
If you use MIDI through, it is
MIDI through. Okay.
Yeah, but there's really no
there's no point. That's just okay.
Now, mind you, if one of the things that I thought about is if a version of the cartridge that would have some sort of audio production capability on it, so some sort of audio ICs or whatnot. Now that might make sense, because then a ROM may also make sense in that case, because then you could put a ROM on there, which is a receiver, right? And then you turn on the CoCo and you'd plug the cartridge in, plug cartridge in, turn on the CoCo, and then have some speakers plugged into the CoCo, and then from a keyboard you'd send commands or MIDI commands to the cartridge, and then the cartridge could reproduce like chiptune type music.
Right. So at that point, your CoCo becomes the synth, and you just use a keyboard controller to play the synth.
Correct. There's a possibility that some of the, like I know Nick Marentes has made some 3-voice sound capabilities, and Nick and I may want to talk, because there's a possibility that we could create a program that would just use the 6-bit DAC to provide sound, maybe some interesting sound or whatnot, and that may be useful as just a device for a performance. There's definitely, there's in certain cases, I not for the CoCo, but in some of the other products that I deliver, there's actually some, I wouldn't call them pro, but kind of pro-am musicians that do shows, and they do live shows with with a classic computer hooked up to their production environment, which is MIDI controlled, and for some of their songs the computer is set to be one of the instruments. And a lot of people come to listen to those shows, kind of an 80s vibe, like you mentioned earlier, kind of a crunchy sound. And then they try to do kind of weird things with the instrument. Sometimes they've written their own sometimes they've written their own software that runs on the computer that does really interesting things and makes interesting sound types and whatnot that you can't get from a regular synthesizer. And then they incorporate that into their performance. So that's possible. If there's a way to make some unique sounds on the CoCo just with the unit itself, then this could be seen as an instrument, in which case you would plug the synthesizer that you're using into the MIDI in, and then you'd play music, and it would output on the CoCo.
Could you add a patch to basic to add a MIDI command, a bit like the play command in Extended Color Basic?
Yeah, you actually bring up that actually would make sense. I didn't think about that before we put the unit in production, and it was kind of important to get it out there. But that would probably make sense to provide some sort of extension to do, M play or play M or something like that. And then like the play command, you type in the notes and whatever and the amount of time you want to play them, and then instead of playing it through the DAC, it actually creates and sends MIDI commands out the cartridge and whatnot, and off to a synthesizer to do that. So yeah, that's definitely a nice idea that would make a ROM worthwhile.
Another question too with that the MIDI through being able to be assigned as a second MIDI out. Mm-hmm. Say, for example, I had a keyboard controller plugged into the MIDI in, and then another synth plugged into, say, the MIDI through, and I was using something like CoCo MIDI Pro to record the performance. Obviously, when I'm recording the performance, I want the MIDI through to act as a MIDI through, so that the whatever synth is plugged in will be played from the keyboard controller.
Right.
Is it possible then to switch that MIDI through to a MIDI out in software, so that then what I've recorded, I can then get that to play out that port without having to change ports?
Not on this version of the unit, but that's a cool idea. And if you and I want to, kind of work through that, I can add that in to a future version of it.
Yeah, we have a question in the live chat about the case.
Yeah.
Well, Michael Pitsley was asking, but you mentioned there's 4 ways to buy it. You can buy it fully assembled with a case, and it is that injection molded red cartridge, right? So it is a physical cartridge.
That's right.
Yeah. And by the way, for those in the live chat, if there were questions you guys had for our various MIDI know-it-alls, please be sure to throw out those questions too. We'll try to address those. No, I mean, I know I'm kind of eating this up, and I know enough to be dangerous about MIDI. I've played with it. I know the scratching of the surface of what MIDI can do, using a piano type keyboard to play, using various computers and synthesizers and brain boxes to synthesize the different instrument sounds. And then the beauty is kind of this multi-track recording concept. So, if you were ever in a band back in the day and everybody had instruments, you had to figure out, well, how can we record all of our different instruments? And you had to get like 4-track recorders and all these different things to record all your different stuff if you're trying to mix something. With MIDI, you kind of have a multi-channel mixing capability through software where you can, and with general MIDI, the limitation was 16 unique instruments, but you could have more than one copy of, like, instrument 1, for example. You could have 2 tracks playing 2 different melody lines, both in pianos, right? I mean, depending on the software, because I know I've done that with drum tracks and percussion, where I would have multiple, because I was performing them, but I would do like this, the kick and the snare in one track, and then I'd go back through and put in some fills and some crashes later on, and I would layer up multiple tracks of just percussion in software. But this is, of course, on a Windows-based system. But I'm assuming even in our CoCo software, you could have multiple tracks of the same instrument in there. Is that a true statement?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's some really neat things you can do with MIDI, and we kind of take it for granted now because we have these soft synths. Like Windows has a built-in MIDI, general MIDI synthesizer that's being done through software. So you could plug in and nowadays too, in a modern computer, isn't a lot of MIDI implemented through USB, where we don't even, I remember when I first had a MIDI, I had to get the adapter to plug into the 15-pin joystick connector on the back of my Sound Blaster card, and then it had the MIDI in and out, the DINs that came off of that. Is MIDI still pretty much doing DINs, or is like modern MIDI doing more USB, or is it kind of a combination of all the above?
Yeah,
both really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's MIDI over USB tends to be a little sort of. It can be really good if the drivers are written properly, but it can also be very. 5-pin standard MIDI DIN is better timing-wise. Most people sort of generally recognize, but USB is handy because it's USB ports on every computer, and if you just want to transfer files or you can save patch data from a synth and a whole lot of things that are not as fussy timing wise, you can do that over USB, no problem.
Darren, is that kind of what you've been finding too? Because you do this probably more than anybody of us.
Yeah, I do both. So I've got a controller keyboard which sits in front of my computer, which is connected via USB MIDI. But that's just my input device, and then output comes out of the MIDI pack and then into my rig via the 5-pin daisy chain through all of the instruments. That's sort of how I do it. Yeah.
Have you found USB timing versus 5-pin timing? Have you noticed anything different there?
Exactly as you said, David. It all comes down to those drivers. So yeah, it's glitchy until you get. You've got to fine tune the driver and get it working properly. That's the key.
Interesting. Because I think you could even, if you have like a Mac and you've got GarageBand, you could plug in a USB keyboard controller and have GarageBand act as your software-based synthesizer too.
Yep. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Doing MIDI now on a modern system, it's so easy to do. It's so easy to take for granted. But doing it on a vintage system, there's just, not only is there just something cool about the fact that this was all bleeding edge at the time it was happening, but it's cool that we can. To me, it's really cool. Not that I would do it. I'm not going to use a CoCo to play MIDI, but the fact that it can is cool. If I was going to dabble in MIDI again now, I would do the quick and easy path. I would get a cheap USB keyboard and run it through a PC, just because I would just be tinkering around. I'm not going to be doing anything heavy. But the fact that you got all you guys here with your real keyboards and you're plugging them into CoCos, and the CoCos are driving all of this, it's impressive. Like I say, it's real easy to take for granted when they're doing it on iPads now. You know what I mean? So I saw everybody in the live chat saying, yeah, I'm running my whole church from my iPad. So modern technology kind of takes away the mysticism and the cool factor of what MIDI is when you're doing it on old keyboards and old computers controlling this stuff. To me, that's just kind of super cool,
There's a lot of talk about latency, on modern systems, and that's because it's very there's a lot of features. It's a lot that there's a lot more going on. But I've been using the Midi Maestro and pushing it real hard with the CoCo, and it works really well. And I just have this feeling it's that when you've got a workflow that comes out of the CoCo and into the CoCo through basic MIDI, it feels like you're very close to the instrument. Like there's no lag, there's no latency. It works flawlessly every time. I never have that thing where I've got to reboot my Mac it's really cool. That's
interesting. It almost seems counter logic here to where an old system works more precisely and more reliably than the new systems. You would think it would be the opposite. But
Dave was talking about sequences before.
Yeah.
And CoCo MIDI Pro on a CoCo is just like an old vintage sequencer. It just you drop it in record, you play into it, it's there, you quantize it, which is the word for that pulls all the notes together and puts them into precise time. So it sounds like you're playing in time. And you play it back, and it's a really fast, quick process. Really good.
It's going to be really interesting to try. Like you said there, Darren, it's modern systems, Windows and everything have got a whole ton of things going on in the background, and they've got to process this and process that. And Windows is written to do all sort of multitasking and everything. Whereas if you're running a dedicated MIDI program on a CoCo, it's just doing one thing.
Except so it's kind of like writing in assembly. It's more bare metal. You're talking to the hardware more real time.
So
I'm going to drag my CoCo. Sorry, go, Dave.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Darren, the interesting thing I was going to mention that you mentioned there is the timing being so tight. Like in the early days, the Amigas were known for their tight timing and everything as well. But a really good test for it, my Roland V-Drums kit spits out tons and tons of data. Like when I'm playing the V-Drums kit, it's spitting out MIDI data for everything on the drums, basically electronic drums. But if I'm playing the hi-hat controller, it's a continuous controller, and as you move your foot on it, it spits out a huge big load of MIDI data, which is good for testing systems and finding out whether they're going to fall over with a lot of MIDI data. So I'm going to give CoCo MIDI Pro a run with my V-Drums kit and just see how well it records in real time.
Yeah. So I'm going as soon as we're allowed to go back to playing live music in venues. I play in a cover band too, and I'm going to drag the CoCo out and add Blue Monday to the to our live set.
Awesome.
That's really cool. That's awesome.
So I'll use it to play the drums and the bass, and we'll do everything else over the top. And
That's cool.
It'll be cool to see some footage because we always record our gigs. It'll be cool to see the CoCo 3 sitting on top of the.
Absolutely.
It'll be like watching Revenge of the Nerds again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. I need a guitar strap for my CoCo.
Oh. Cool.
That's cool.
Kind of an
Thinking
interesting
about this
question.
now.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian Weisler.
So if Nick knew the bare minimum that was needed to generate the data for a MIDI stream, could Nick incorporate that, let's say, into his most recent game, that Rally SG there, and have basically like plug a MIDI into it? That could be the background music as you're playing the game. Is there that much overhead with MIDI that if you just had the bare minimum to play notes?
Actually, it's far less overhead doing
Yeah.
MIDI than it is doing digitized sound. So yeah.
Definitely
Now, convincing Nick to actually do that's a whole different
So
story.
so the reality now just is Jim Brain still here? I mean, essentially, because Darren had asked earlier, could we do something in BASIC? I mean, essentially, we're just poking data into a memory location somewhere to talk to these input and output ports, right? Like peeking and poking from memory locations.
Correct. It is exactly it. So in order to do BASIC, I'll see if after the show I can whip up some simple BASIC to do it. But you have a couple pokes up front to set up the UART, the chip, and then sending MIDI commands is very easy. So the only things you need to know is the hexadecimal number 80 and 90. Right, so 80 is key down and 90 is key up, and the 0 in that is the channel. So 90 is key up on channel 0, 91 would be key up on channel 1, and so forth.
Key up meaning the key has been released. The key is going back up,
the key
and
has
key
been
down.
released, right?
Okay,
that's right. And then there's a second value after that. So you send the MIDI, the standard MIDI command is 2 bytes. The first byte is what you want to do, key up or key down, and then the second part of that is what channel do you want to use, 0 through F, right, 0 through 15.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second value is the note, right, the note itself. So it's key down, channel 0, 100, which would be whatever note 100 is, and MIDI has a mapping for all the 255 notes, right? So whatever middle C is, and then the only thing you have to do is just do those in pairs, right? Note down, what's the note? Note up, what's the note? And so you just do that. So you can play and complete playing a note on a keyboard by sending 4 bytes to the MIDI cartridge. 2 of them will be you send when you want to start the note, and 2 of them you send when you want to release and quit playing the note. Now, I mean, there's a whole bunch of other stuff, pitch bend and all kinds of other stuff, but at the heart of it, that's all you need. And you're right, you just poke a value to one of the registers, and that sends that value on its way to the MIDI system.
So
in BASIC, you might have to play a slower song if you're trying to do like multi notes at the same time to try to keep the timing right. But yeah, a couple of notes or a couple of voices at once, and longer notes like quarter notes, eighth notes shouldn't be a problem in BASIC.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, people have to figure out, how, because at some point the ability to send the data out will overcome. But still, even with BASIC, sending a note is something that I think BASIC can do probably a couple thousand times a second. So I think if you weren't doing too much else, you could probably do at least a half dozen instruments at probably eighth notes at the very shortest, or I mean, for sure you could do eighth notes. I don't know if you could do 16th, but I think eighth notes would be due as long as your tempo isn't terribly. Okay.
What would be better is to since the BASIC is in RAM on the CoCo 3, patch the play command so it's actually is sending to the MIDI port. So you use the play command, play ABC would go to the MIDI port.
Yeah, you could definitly do that. Absolutely.
You just have to patch it to allow multiple channels.
Yeah, or you can extend on the command itself if you want. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's also things like volume and stuff too. So yeah.
There is.
There is, but
But you
that's
could
also that's also just a 2-byte command. You know,
yeah.
here's the command, and then what's the volume level you want. But I guess my point, yes, all those things are possible. It's doable in BASIC, and yeah, there's probably an upper limit to how much you can do in BASIC. But to the original requester question, it is very, very simple to send a properly formatted MIDI command through the cartridge from BASIC.
Yeah, and you can't imagine how valuable that would be, like that not just to write some simple music, but actually to control a whole studio from your CoCo.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
True.
So it could almost be where Nick could have the music code in his game running, and whether or not the cartridge is there, it wouldn't matter because it's not going to make the game crash. It's just that there was something there to listen to those note values that would pick up that information and play it. But if it's not there, it wouldn't matter.
Correct.
Correct.
Because we're almost literally Lyra is a COM program, and just like any COM program, you can write the bytes out in BASIC and accomplish the same thing. It's just much more convenient to have a COM program to organize your thoughts, do the volumes and pitches and blends and things. But hey, if you're a game writer,
right. So what if we were to kind of summarize the various MIDI packages that are available on the CoCo? I know you started off on your slideshow, Rob Inman, but why don't you just run down that list again? How many programs do we have? What are they called? And I'm assuming at this point we can get them all on the archive. There's,
Yeah.
Maybe mention if they're CoCo 1 and 2 compatible too for people that have a CoCo 1 and 2.
Yeah, there's at least 5, probably more, but the main ones are Lyra or Lyra. I'm going with Lyra, but
tomato.
Ultimuse, and CoCo MIDI Pro. There's also CoCo MIDI 2, which is a little bit harder to find, but it was the one I played Axel F on. So that's 5 that I've discovered so far just by going through the music.
There's player programs too, like MF Play and others that Brian has shown.
I mean, that's impressive when you think about it. There's close to a half a dozen different MIDI recorders and players for the CoCo, so it was obviously a big thing. I didn't get into MIDI till I had already graduated past the CoCo, but it's impressive, like a lot of things that I'm finding about now that the CoCo did and that the CoCo can still do. Multitasking operating system is impressive. MIDI controlling is impressive that the CoCo is able to do all this kind of stuff. And this new little our Midi Maestro cartridge now, thanks to Jim's brain, is an impressive little piece of hardware too. So
yeah. I mean, if you remember Rainbow, the heyday of MIDI was probably the late 80s. Basically about the 84, 85 through 88, 89. And at that point, speech systems, which actually did a lot of the early MIDI stuff like Lyra and Musica and the Symphony 12 and a bunch of other musical related products as well, they used to take out like 4 to 5 pages of ads for all of their stuff. They were advertising as much as Tom Mix or Spectra were at their best of times.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how big MIDI and sound and music software on the CoCo was. It was rivaling the biggest game companies we had.
That's impressive. And the thing I do remember, again, from just visiting studios back in the day, was that the Atari ST was notoriously known for and marketed as being a MIDI, a MIDI product, and it had built-in hardware-based MIDI ports, and supposedly the timing on that was very precise as well. And then one that we didn't know about too much in the States, but the MSX platform, a lot of those, like there was a Yamaha-branded MSX music workstation that had MIDI ports, MIDI in and out and through on the workstation. So they were selling basically a kind of a PC that was meant to be a musical workstation running something like Lyra or these other programs as part of its base application. So I remember seeing Atari ST 1040s in studios and stuff, and being really impressed by that. But that was considered a real high-end system in its heyday,
Back in 1984, 85, my first music computer was the Yamaha CX5M. That was the system. It was I had a DX7, and the CX5M basically had a scaled down version of a DX7 built into it, and it had the MIDI ports and everything built in. But it was specifically designed as a music system. Exactly what you're saying.
I'm
still have it.
I'm seeing the terms ADSR thrown out in chat. I'm not familiar with that acronym.
Attack decay sustain release. It's the notes.
Attack decay sustain release. Okay, that's it. That's gotcha. ADSR.
Is there a question there? Or?
No, they were just, I guess, when we were talking about the MIDI protocol as far as key up or key down. Kevin Holloway started off by throwing out their ADSR. And they're also mentioning that if you go to MIDI.org, you can see the whole syntax of the message structure and stuff like that. So Alan Murphy's throwing that out there. So this is cool. So I don't think we wanted to get too deep into all the semantics and science of MIDI, into the protocol and the binary and all this kind of stuff. But suffice it to say, Brian Schubring has definitely opened up a nice can of worms with showing the world what we can do MIDI-wise with the CoCo. MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface, and it's a way to plug a cable from a computer into a musical instrument and vice versa, and to be able to use your computer to output music to an instrument, to use your computer to input music to your computer to record, so you can use your computer as a recording studio. There's a lot you can do with MIDI, and the CoCo apparently has been very MIDI-centric for a long time. And it seems like we're getting into a MIDI revival right now, which is kind of cool. It's kind of exciting because I was a big fan of listening to MIDI songs on my PCs and dabbling in MIDI with my crappy keyboards and stuff at the time. So I'm looking forward to hearing what people start to come up with. That might be cool to have like a kind of submit your MIDI composures. Because people want to compose an original piece in MIDI and record it, and we can play it on the show. That'd be kind of cool as a segment, just the MIDI song of the week or something. Good
idea.
You know what I mean? So that'd be neat, just kind of feature, especially if you're doing it in the CoCo somehow in the mix of the process. Here's my CoCo MIDI thing I produced this week, and we can kind of bring that to the show to let people hear it. I love hearing electronic music. My first exposure to electronic music was the CoCo. So hearing the Bach fugue and all those classical songs and the William Tell overture, that really got me interested in electronic music, other than like what was on the radio. So knowing that a computer could generate music really sparked that interest, and I've never lost that kind of passion for appreciating electronic music, going back 40 years now. So Robert Murphy saying would go well with the art gallery. Are you being sarcastic there? Well, we got to remember to side of sarcasm there. So, Jason Wright, does anybody want to admit Jason Reichert? I don't know. Can we trust him?
Oops, I just accidentally did. Sorry.
Okay. Is there any more we want to add right now, or should we maybe take a commercial break and come back?
Well, I have one general MIDI question.
Oh, I like what you did there. What?
And make sure we get this right here. Now,
muted. Your mute button, Jason.
Yes, MIDI does support a mute feature, if that's what you're asking, Jason.
We just had a live demonstration, actually.
Oh, that was easy. No, what I know now, they're talking about the different instruments in MIDI. Now, is there just a certain set of instruments, and you're locked into that set? There's only so many possible ones, or can they be added?
In the general MIDI spec, there's a set specification, but MIDI itself, you can, it's controlling synthesizers. So
yeah, the instruments are. You're asking. You were talking about your ukulele there.
Yeah. So, are we able to add the $5 ukulele? That's my ultimate question.
You can sample it. You could sample that into a set.
Absolutely.
Into this beast of O behind me, we could sample it into the Fairlight.
Yeah, that's what's called taking the long way to a joke.
Yes. That was a long setup but the punchline, the payoff was worth it right there.
Sure it was.
I think one of the things that James Jones had mentioned earlier in the chat is that the keyboard is what we consider the controller, and that's your input device. And there are other types of MIDI controllers that not only simulate a piano keyboard, but there are string. So there are guitar synthesizers.
Yeah, Roland had a good one.
There are wind instrument synthesizers. So one of the reasons why there's a few reasons why guitars in MIDI typically don't sound as fluid, and one of them is the plucking of the string and the vibrations of the strings. It's impossible to produce that on a piano keyboard, because that keyboard is rigid. It's not going to vibrate like a guitar string will. And so they actually make, and I've actually seen guys in bands that have had pickups that went to their guitar where they're playing their guitar to control a MIDI instrument, and they'd use a foot pedal to change. Like the guy sitting here playing an organ on his guitar, and he would just change out his patches through his foot pedal, and they've used a guitar as an input device. So there's different ways to bring in different things. So if you wanted to get MIDI to sound more like guitar strings, and you had a MIDI guitar instrument, that might do it. Am I correct in assuming that? To get the vibration of the strings and the plucking sensation, and
back in the early 90s, around 92, 93, I was part of a duo, electronic music duo. It was two of us, a guitarist and myself. And the guitarist had a Roland GR1 guitar synth, which was the big one that that Roland released in the early 90s. And we had a whole segment of a live show that we used to perform, and Marty would play the keyboard parts on his guitar, and I'd play the guitar parts on my keyboard live in front of an audience.
Wow.
And they used to love it. We had a lot of fun with that.
Well, I mean, a guitar that is fairly easy to synthesize on a keyboard is like a bass guitar, because Geddy Lee would play the bass. Ray Manzarek from the Doors used to play, keyboard bass. So bass notes are not quite as chord structured as guitar notes are. And to me, like the synthesized guitar, when you try to hit a chord on a MIDI instrument for guitar, it sounds so fake, where, a real chord with real strings has got such a different sound to it, the layers and everything, that to me, I have not heard, and maybe because I don't have the right instruments, but I have not heard good electronic guitar chord sounds synthesized well. But maybe you guys know that there's better tech out there now that does that.
If I can jump in real quick.
Yeah.
It comes back to that envelope generator where you're talking about, where you need a really sharp attack, a really fast decay, but then you need a couple of different sustains and releases in a guitar, and gets a little complicated.
Yeah, because you got like finger vibrato you got to worry about, and pinched harmonics and all kinds of stuff. So
it's not one mode.
Remember back in the 80s, some synthesizers had a breath control. I think you blow through it, and you could sort of add some of that control.
Yeah. Darren. I was just going to say, Darren, since you're much more involved with the modern stuff, have you heard any really good guitar
reproductions?
Yeah, look, when I play in that cover band, we only have one guitarist, so when he does a solo, I'll often play some power chords behind him. No one notices, but I think a lot of it's the way you play it too. Like there's certainly stuff you wouldn't attempt. Otherwise, it would sound cheesy. Like if I was going to do a guitar solo on a synth, I think that always kind of sounds a bit cheesy. But if you're playing some nice chords behind a guitarist, that sounds really good. Some of the newer instruments are almost perfect, but to a trained ear, you're not going to fool anybody, I don't think. But yeah, when you play back a MIDI file and you get that guitar solo and it just sounds.
You go, not the MIDI guitar
awful.
solo.
Yeah, it's just terrible. But I think it's just poorly executed.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll put some guitar in a track and see if we can see how close we can get it.
I remember a program years ago that was called Keytar, and you used your keyboard or use a mouse to simulate like you were strumming the strings on a guitar, and it sent those through as keys to your MIDI controller. And that sounded a little bit more realistic as far as getting the reaction or action of the strings,
Isn't that the name of those keyboards which were like a guitar? They call them keytars.
Was it?
Yeah.
Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Yeah.
With a strap around your neck and yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
Some funky town.
Yeah, and there are some comments out there saying that there are bass players who play their bass guitars like 6-string guitars, and that's absolutely true. I didn't mean to poo-poo bass players, but I know just in general most bass lines aren't complex chord structures. So, not that bass guitar can't be as vibrant as a 6-string guitar. All right, so do we want to take a break? Is there more we want to talk about in MIDI, or do you think we've kind of done a good And we kind of put a good fork in MIDI for today.
One thing I'd
wanna
like
toss
to is if
something out there.
Okay.
Yeah. For the MIDI pack, I had a friend of mine who built one into his color computer.
Okay. Internal.
And I was just wondering if maybe we could have it so that the MIDI pack was like a daughter board underneath the processor, or like a port extender before you put the multi-pack in. That way you're not taking up a slot in the
Oh,
multi-pack.
that's feature creep for the SD extender right here, Jim.
And that because it's at only one address, and and it's not a wide address range either, so it's like only 1 or 2 bytes. So I was just thinking, do that real time clock. You can have your buffer in there for the or not buffer. I'm sorry, the EEPROM. For maybe extra features and stuff.
So
just want to toss that out.
No, I would say that and the thing we talked about earlier, the basic command for play and whatnot. What I'd encourage folks to do is there is a Discord server for CoCoTALK, or actually for this whole kind of
MIDI
environment. And one of the channels in there under the hardware section is a MIDI channel. And so if you could, Brian and whoever else has suggestions, if you could go in there and put those things in there, because it's like I might not be able to handle that right now, or maybe I don't have time, but somebody else has a little bit of time right now. But at least if the idea is there, it's kind of living there, and people can pick up on it, and we can kind of talk about it and see what it means to do that. I've thought for some time about an idea of a daughter board to bring some additional capabilities to the CoCo without having to use an external cartridge. And your idea is the germ of what I'm thinking as well. But the question is you kind of get one chance to do that. So, what kind of things do you want in there? So in any event, I think going out to the channel and putting that stuff in there would be really helpful for me and other people as well to converse about it there, so we don't take up more time here.
And I'd like to extend that too, because basically for people that are watching the show after the fact and aren't able to ask live questions in the chat, etc., if you have any questions, put them in that same MIDI channel on Discord, because we are planning on doing a follow-up show, to get more into the intricacies, and Darren's going to demonstrate actually using the CoCo as a full recording studio and how he builds his songs, etc. But we can throw in some of that kind of stuff as well as the hardware questions and software programming questions, etc., all into the MIDI channel on Discord.
That's right. So
definitely want. So what's your nickname in there, Jim? Is it
Go for Retro?
Go for Retro.
Oh yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay. The only thing I wanted to end on is, so I found out very late in the design process that the Dragon that had a MIDI cartridge available for it. I evidently didn't have that much traction, and so there's not very much support for it. But I did support the Dragon in the device. If you see on the kind of right hand side of my screen, you can see a little jumper there for CoCo and Dragon. It is set up different. They put theirs at a different address than the CoCo version. However, if there's folks that are listening after the fact that have a Dragon, I sure would love to get in touch with you and see if maybe during our follow-up show we could see if there's any traction or validity to showing the Dragon doing MIDI, because it's just as capable to do MIDI as the CoCo, but I just didn't see as much available there, and that's a shame.
I'd also like to know, like, if you have it set to the CoCo addressing, do the CoCo 1 and 2 programs like Lyra and stuff work on the Dragon as is, and maybe that's not even necessary? Like, if they didn't have much software support, you might be able to just load the CoCo program and go.
And indeed, I think the difference on those programs, I think there's some differences in the keyboard and whatnot. So with the programs are,
if they're keyboard driven like Musica, that would might be an issue mapping the keyboard. But Lyra, whatever you want to call it, I mean, that's basically a mouse driven program, so that should work on both. I would guess.
And if it does, then obviously it would work with the CoCo, with the setting on CoCo. So it just would be nice to get some Dragon participation to see, is there something else that needs to be done, or just what?
So, I mean, we're talking about feature creep and designing new products, and I know this is one of your favorite topics, Jim Brain, as a product designer. Can you just throw on extra slice of cheese while you're at it? But what do we think the market is? I mean, right now we already have a MIDI product that's out there. I don't know how many it's sold, but hopefully after this show, maybe a few more will get sold. But I'm just wondering, what do we think the market is? How many people? I mean, I know there's Bill Pierce, and Bill Pierce probably has everything he already needs. But I'm sure if you make a new toy, he might want it. But how many people are out there that are going to buy this? That right now, you got a few people that are going to buy your card now. We're talking about a new version of with this or that and the other. Will these same people buy 2 or 3 versions of your card as we add more? Like Brian Schubring, you probably would, because this is your hobby. But like you say, you're going to design something again. We don't want to have to keep redesigning this, because I would imagine the total market's it's got to be relatively small, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
I got 4 CoCos.
I keep spending money.
That was one of the reasons why I haven't, as I've told many people, I try to not do projects. I try to not hand assemble stuff if I don't have to. And so this one I am, because I wasn't sure what the volume is. And so, that's one way to kind of get something out of the market without having to have a huge investment. The best way to deliver these is via machine assembly, and there's a minimum for those, so it's like 100 units. I'm not opposed to making a revision that would incorporate some of these other features, but I think we kind of touched on today what the primary mover is, right? People don't buy a MIDI pack to have a MIDI pack. I mean, there's some people who do because they need to have one of everything, but most people buy a MIDI pack because either one of Nick's games has MIDI capability, or there's a great amount of software or whatnot that they can easily get to and use that enables the MIDI pack, and they have a way to use the MIDI pack with their synthesizer or whatnot. I think a lot of people assume that a synthesizer is required in order to use MIDI. You can use a regular PC with a MIDI to USB adapter to use your PC as a synthesizer, but then the question is, what is the CoCo bringing to the table in that, as opposed to just playing the song directly from within the PC? I really like the idea of being able to have basic programs do MIDI commands. That sounds like that could be a kind of a killer feature. The idea of having a game that does MIDI would be another potential, killer feature, whatnot. I feel like the hardware always lags. There has to be something that says to people, hey, I want to do this, and doing this requires buying this hardware, so it's kind of a means to an end from them. So I think that's probably the bigger question, is not necessarily the market, but what's the possible uses, and then the market of those possible uses, because that would encourage me to, design something. Again, like I said, if I was design another unit, either internal or external, I think one of the things that I would consider doing is incorporating some audio capabilities into the cartridge as well. Just the reason is I think having a chiptune type MIDI player is a really cool idea, and that would be a nice option for the CoCo to portray. But I'm eager to have other ideas, and we'll just have to figure out, what's that market base for that, and does it reach that threshold to do a machine assembly or not? How many things can we put in, and how can we keep the cost reasonable? But again, I think those are best long discussions held in the
MIDI
Discord
channel.
environment.
Yeah. Well, I have 2 things to add to that. If you were going to redesign this, because we're getting into the whole sound card debate. There's all these different sound cards that are not being supported as it is. To me, the MIDI, the next generation of this MIDI thing would be great if it was a self-contained instrument, because I think the market would be this. It's a MIDI controller. There's already a half a dozen programs that are available for free that support MIDI. There's hundreds of MIDI songs that are already out there that you can get for free from the archive. So if you had let's say $100 product that you can plug into your CoCo that was like an SD extender where we don't need a multi-pack, because again, the multi-pack to me is going to be a showstopper. Anything that's going to require me to plug more crap in, I'm not interested in personally, but I'm not every consumer. But if this was a pass-through device and it was a MIDI controller and a synthesizer that was at least general MIDI compliant, then the market would be this. Plug this in and play 10,000 songs that are on your SDC image and listen to them. If nobody writes a game that supports it, well, it doesn't matter, because you can I would rather listen to 1,000 MIDI songs on my CoCo than 1,000 Orchestra 90 songs. You know what I mean? On a good sounding chip.
Right.
So that right there is a market that nobody has to buy any software. Nobody has to write any software. The players are there. The music library is there. And then if Nick Marentes or anybody else that wants to support this does support it, that's even, mo better. All right. So,
and the fact you can actually program the MIDI from basic, like you probably can't do like hyper, extensive tunes. You could make a basic game with background music in pure basic, no ML routines, no nothing.
Correct. Yeah, those are all great ideas. And I think one of the things to understand is I don't feel bad about the initial version of the cartridge as far as bringing it to market, because as Brian indicated, the whole reason this started is there was a request by Brian, hey, does anybody have the schematic for the MIDI cartridge that was available back in the day? And there was a hand-drawn version of the schematic that was posted on Facebook. And I saw that, and my concern was, if somebody a couple years from now needs to fix one of those cartridges or whatever, the hand-drawn schematic is going to be it was very hard to read, it was very hard to understand and whatnot. And so my goal was not really even thinking about a product. Mine was just, I want to make this readable and in a version or format that can be exported as a nice graphic so that people have it for, for archival purposes. Brian then, we hooked up and connected, and he was like, I really do think there's market for this. The person that previously made them is no longer in the community or doesn't seem to be available to supply them. And I thought, well, this is a pretty low entry to the market, and I'll just do this cartridge without a whole lot of bells and whistles. And I think that's a fine idea. And if that's as far as it goes, then that's great. But if there is interest in something else, I would see that thing as the first version of something else, not the second version of this. I just think this was a nice way to have, as an open source solution, a set of plans out there so that forevermore there will be an option to create a MIDI cartridge so that you can use it with the CoCo. And if you have one and you need to figure out what's wrong with it, you'll have nicely drawn plans to help you out.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, how about this? We're gonna run a commercial for the CoCo Midi Maestro again. That was produced by our very own Rob Inman, and then we'll play another commercial break because I need to take my designated Ron Delvaux potty break at this point. So we're gonna run a Midi Maestro commercial. We'll run a brief 1.5-minute commercial break, and we'll be back and we'll talk about something. How about some news, some gaming news? Who knows, right?
Sounds good.
All right, we'll be back after these words, boys and girls.
The music is back. Get your motor running. Head out on the highway. Looking for adventure. And whatever comes our way. The Midi Maestro. Available now. Only from Retro Innovations. As seen on CoCoTALK. Go 4retro.com.
CoCoTALK will return after these messages.
CoCo de, c'est le coq champignon, des micros et dans le pion. Pour le jeu, il est pas bavard, les études, c'est pas bizarre. L'expansion, il envoie ça, les commandes, tu vas voir ça. Notre CoCo est programmable, pour tes cours, c'est bien serviable. CoCo 2 de Radio Chaton, l'affaire est dans le sac.
Un ordinateur couleur qui a de la personnalité. Le CoCo 2 de Radio Shack. En solde pour Noël à partir de 149,84.
CoCo 2 de Radio Chaton, l'affaire est dans le sac, c'est toi, c'est CoCo 2.
And now, CoCo Thoughts by Samuel Gimes. If you're using your color computer in Quebec and it stops working, is it now a CoCo won't do?
Hi, Ron Delvaux, Timberman, CoCo Fest, CoCoTALK.
In a world where RGB produces black and white video, one cable can make a difference. Switcheroo. CoCo3SCARtCable.com.
Hey, have you got your CoCo 3 yet? Hi, this is Rick Adams, author of Temple of Ram and Shanghai, and you've tuned into CoCoTALK, the nation's leading live talk show featuring the Tandy color computer.
What's going on, everybody? Original Gamer Stevie Stroh here, and if you're a fan of vintage computing and retro gaming, then you're going to love our retro swag shop at 8bit256.com. There you will find custom designs by Instagram artist Joel M. Adams. You can get I'm a Coconut, CoCoTALK, and other cool video game images on a t-shirt, coffee mug, or mouse pad. So if you love retro, then head on over to the retro swag shop at 8bit256.com today. Tell them the Original Gamer Stevie Stroh sent you.
Radio Shack's store-wide manager's red tag sale is on now. We've slashed prices 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%. Save on famous Radio Shack hi-fi, car stereo, radios, toys, TV games, calculators, walkie-talkies, and CB radios. Look for the big red tag. Save like never before on these and literally hundreds of red tag specials. Hurry into Radio Shack today.
Hi, this is Randy Kindig of the Floppy Days podcast. I just love me some CoCo, and nobody covers it better than Steve Strobridge. You're listening to CoCoTALK.
From around the world, what you need to know. Get caught up on News with L. Curtis Boyle.
And now a Muppet News Flash.
And we're back, and we are here with news with L. Curtis Boyle.
Hello, everyone. I'm assuming my screen is being shared here.
Yeah,
So
it is.
just to continue on the MIDI track for a bit here, we mentioned during the MIDI segment that Brian Schubring's actually been doing a series of videos on Facebook showing some of the stuff you can do with the CoCo with MIDI. And he's got 2 episodes out so far, which I highly recommend, especially if you like this episode we had today. It's currently on Facebook only. Stevie and Brian are working on getting them up onto YouTube as well, because I know some people are pretty anti-Facebook and never touch the thing. So his first one is basically just a general explanation of MIDI, which is the one here. And then his second episode was getting more into playing compacted MIDI files, the CMF0 protocol that he was talking about under Nitrous 9 using MF Play. And then also his little jukebox front end. And I have no idea what all other stuff he's got planned, but it's a pretty good series. And if you're into MIDI or thinking of getting into MIDI, it's a great series to watch.
Suggestions welcome.
Also, again, the MIDI channel on Discord. We're going to load that sucker up. Okay, and then on to the regular news. So the first one here, Bill Pierce, we were talking about earlier, because he's the guy who was doing DeBarden Studios and is currently in charge of doing the new releases of Ultimuse. I was also kind of in charge of doing the regular VCC. Now there's also the OVCC project as well. So we just issued a release a couple of days ago here that actually patches the composite mode colors for artifacting, so they're much closer to the original CoCos, because the original VCC had this really garish blue and really garish red that didn't match the CoCo whatsoever. It looked pretty bad. It was better than nothing, but not by much. And the new ones actually look a lot better. So you can download that off of GitHub, and whoever's doing links, it'll be on there. But just to show you, this is great.
Sorry, there might be some more problems with that F version, because I copied that across, and my latest game doesn't work. The joysticks, only the one of the joystick axes work, yet in the old version it'll work correctly. So I don't know if there's something else broken. I haven't explored it and I haven't mentioned it yet, but yeah,
okay, I didn't hear
just
that.
be aware there may be other bugs in that F version. So
Has anybody else
check it out.
tried this to see whether they're hitting issues too, or is that just uniquely Nick at this point?
I
The
haven't
colors are a
looked at-
different improvement, but yeah, there could be some other bugs in there. So I'll work that out today.
I've run into some other issues with F. Like it doesn't save. Like the E version would save your cartridge settings. The F version does not appear to.
Okay, so make sure you guys report those to Bill, because he was saying
Yeah,
that he's got a
yeah.
few other little changes he wants to do and do another release fairly quickly. So
Now, and I think it was Jim Rye, and because he posted a picture of this in the GameON challenge where he was doing something in VCC, And somebody says, "Oh, that's cool. How did you do that?" It's like, well, I kind of just tweaked the source code myself, but I think he gave those changes to Bill, who put it into the official release. So I think we saw a sneak peek of this in the GameON challenge last week or so of that. Now, my question is, because I haven't looked at it, obviously they fixed what the red is now orange and the blue is a softer blue. But did they also fix things like how the fonts were really rugged too? Has any of that smoothing happened?
No, I think this is a pretty minor update.
Okay.
Just because he had a lot of people, saying, the colors are completely wrong.
Yeah. Okay. So, but still, yeah, that's a huge improvement.
I know Walter's still working on OVCC, which has a lot of patches, like a full 639 core. He was talking about adding the second hard drive support that we use in Nitrous 9 with MAME and the SDC. So, I mean, that's a competing product there. But I haven't heard too much about that lately. I don't know if that's not getting updated.
I don't know if it's a competing product. It's more of the complementary product to this, right? So
Yeah, I guess somewhat. Yeah, it depends on your point of view. I mean, it's cross-platform, which is one nice thing. But I know it had some issues too, where it was, some of the menus and stuff were pretty slaughtered on my end. I know last time I tried, I haven't tried it recently, but.
Cool.
Next up, Bill Noble uploaded, and this is actually a sneak preview of some of the stuff that's coming with the Beta 6 by the end of the year for Nitrous 9 as well. He's got a new SDC control utility. Now, Barry Nelson and Tim Linder, I think, were the original authors of the original one. The syntax is kind of odd. You have to kind of remember these weird commands. What Bill's done is made it much more English style, and he's included the source code, and he's actually put up as a separate download so you guys can get it now without having to wait for Beta 6 to come out. So that's available on Facebook. He's also put on that Color Computer Archive. I can't remember if it's actually viewable on there yet or not. I know because Gwim just, does an update maybe once or twice a week type thing. So depending on when the cycle is. And he also put up a little video of it showing here, which I'll just quickly play. So genuine shaky cam. So now you can see, actually types the word dir, whereas it was a single letter thing before that did it. And he's got built-in help. All the various commands that you can do there. So it'll come in quite handy. We're going to be using a version of this actually as a pop-up on G Shell as our eventual plan, so that you can actually right-click on, say, the second hard drive image or whatever, and change the image that's mounted there on the fly in G Shell while you're running. So it'll be a bit more GUI oriented, but this is the basis of that. Next up, Phil Harvey Smith in the Dragon Facebook group. Has put up some custom cases he's doing. Now, if you remember a couple months ago, he had that custom debugging hardware. It had all those wires coming out, that little mini LCD screen that was showing, exactly what the interrupt lines are doing and, various parts of the 6 and a 9, etc. So he's actually designing an external case design now to actually put that on, that you can kind of mount it on top of your Dragon, and then you can actually monitor if you're trying to do hardware debugging or software debugging at the hardware level. And there's one, little screens will kind of go in those little square boxes beside the dials. I don't know what everything else on this does because I don't remember exactly what's on the hardware, but he was taking some design suggestions from the Facebook group of Dragon on how to set this up. And it's actually a really cool project. I don't know if it'll work on the CoCo, but it'd be kind of handy though for debugging at a hardware level to figure out what's going wrong with the program you're trying to write.
So the LCD, sorry, those little screens there are basically little LCD screens, are they?
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. If you remember the video that we showed, he actually had a video of the loose wired prototype version laying beside the Dragon about 2 months ago, which was actually showing, like NMI line just triggered and the FRQs here and that kind of thing.
It's kind of like a little panel, what you would see like on a the floppy, the GoTech floppy emulator,
exactly,
like a little
exactly.
screen like that. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Next up, this is on YouTube, and this is a Facebook group called, it was on the Facebook group, but the Digital Orphanage is the name of the YouTube channel. It's not one I've seen before, based in the UK, obviously, for Dragons. What he's doing here is that the Museum of Computing in Swindon, which is in the UK, of course, with COVID, it's been shut down. So he's decided to help them refurbish a bunch of Dragons. Now, they had 11 Dragons that were not fully functional or had not been tested at the very least. They have a couple of demo units that are up right now. So he decided to go through, and he's actually going to be refurbishing them all. So there's the interior of the museum. And then he starts going through like power supplies, and there's 2 different power supplies, and he actually gets into quite a bit of detail, but he's actually going to try to refurbish all of these and then give them back to the museum, and whether the museum's going to keep them all or maybe give some away, I'm not sure. But this is like part one of going through the power supplies and some other things, and then he's going to be going through the internals and the keyboards and everything else on future episodes. So if you want to learn a lot about the internals of a Dragon and how the whole thing works, it's a good series to watch. And then this is an MC10 Facebook group story here from Robert.
Incredible system. Fantastic system.
Yeah, we've got its biggest booster on the show right now, Mr. Stevie Stroh, ladies and gentlemen. So what he's been doing lately, there's an emulator that actually supports some higher modes that don't exist on the real MC10, but now he's been writing some software to take a higher color image and then drop it down to the screen that the real MC10 can support. And he's been showing some of the results, and some of them are actually getting pretty good here. He's added some dithering and stuff here. So this is a zoom up of the original image on the left, which I think is a 16 color higher res image, and the right's basically the equivalent of a P mode 1 on the CoCo.
Yeah, neat.
One of the built-in modes there. But the dithering looks pretty good, and it's actually starting to really resemble the artwork that he's trying to do. And he's had multiple examples of these. And one guy actually responded to him and said this would be great for writing a graphical adventure game in the MC10.
Mm-hmm.
Now the MC10, I believe, does have a floppy emulator somewhere. I don't know if it's part of the MCX or if that was
the
a separate
MCX
project.
128, you could just pull it over MC. It acts like a floppy. It's like a drive wire.
Oh, the drive wire,
floppy.
right?
Yeah.
The drive wire protocol.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be pretty interesting to have an MC10 actually doing a full-blown graphic adventure game like that.
Canadian retro things.
Yeah, Ken, I'm sure he's in the chat somewhere. Now, Ken, if you remember, I complained extensively last week that he got this CoCo 3 in the mail and then did nothing but just take it apart and spray air on it and absolutely nothing to fire it up to see if it worked.
You were wrong.
Which completely sucked. So
You were wrong.
I'm glad he's fixed it up now, and he's actually done the video where he's actually fired the sucker up. So
You only promised an unboxing.
And then CoCo Tree.
Yep,
CoCo
demonstrates
Trois.
Temple of Rom. Demonstrates the basic. He actually is starting to write a little basic program, which it's CoCo 1.2 compatible. He's got this little ship, but I'll just play a little bit here.
So I guess that really makes me very happy because I now have a mostly working CoCo 3 computer. Just needs a little bit of tweaking here and there. Well, there we go. I mean, that CoCo 3 is working way better than I was expecting it to. So
Now, if you remember when we showed his first video like that, this is one of those ones that got sold at a pawn shop, so they'd cut the power cut off and then jury rig something with electrical tape, and so he was really worried when he bought it because I mean, the CoCo's 3s are getting quite expensive, and he wanted to get something he could afford. So
Mhm.
he waited and got this one, not expecting it to really work, but basically everything's working fine. He loaded stuff off cassette, saved to cassette, joysticks are working, the keyboard seems to be working. So obviously he doesn't have an RGB monitor or anything yet, but I'm interested to see what he. Sorry,
That
was
sucks.
it, Nick?
That sucks to cut the power cords off of them.
Well, it seems to be a standard procedure at pawn shops, apparently. I don't know what the exact explanation for that is, but...
Well, it's also
They do it-
scary in the maintenance world. You cut off the power cord to indicate the device needs maintenance before it could be plugged in again.
Yeah, it's
So
done
it
as
could be a safety.
It's done as a liability thing too, so that the people who sell them, if they sell a faulty product and someone gets injured from it, then they're not liable.
Okay.
It's also something that's common in the electronic scrap industry that they will cut off the power cords and scrap the cords for their copper.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because we've seen multiple videos of people that have picked up these things at pawn shops or even in garage sales, and the power cord's been either completely cut off and it's not even there, or somebody has had it cut off and then jury rigged something on, by just tying the lines together by hand and electrical taping and hoping it works. Next up, Keith in the UK here. He's been doing a series. Well, he's been doing all kinds of CPUs and machines here. He's been doing 6809 stuff with the Vectrix, with the Fujitsu FM7, with the Dragon 3264, the CoCo 1 and 2. And he's been doing multiple ones on the CoCo 1, 2, and the Dragon because, of course, their hardware is very similar. Last episode we showed that he did was reading the joysticks and the keyboard. In this case here, he's actually going through graphics, and he goes through how to set up semi-graphics 4, how to do all the the regular graphics modes, how to do the graphics modes that BASIC does not support. He very briefly touches on the semi-graphics here, but he goes into like how to set the screen mode, how to map it whereabouts to go in RAM, and you want the screen to show up, how to set the color set. He actually briefly draws a shape onto the screen, a little sprite thing. He's eventually planning on doing a game that's going to be cross-platform. And he shows the source code and exactly how everything works, which is pretty cool. And then he has a little emulator stuff he uses. He uses XROR. Let's see if we can find the actual Yeah, so here it's kind of not the great color set here, and he didn't clear the screen first, but you can kind of make out this little shape of a figure, a sprite he's going to be using on this game. So he's been very knowledgeable. I mean, he's done stuff on the Z/Z80, he's done stuff on the 68000, the 6502, and a bunch of others. So he really knows the CPUs, he knows the differences between them, which he'll mention when he's going through the videos. So if any of you are coming in new to the CoCo and you've, say, used an Apple or an Atari with the 6502, he'll actually will in the earlier parts of the series go through and explain, you know, what the differences between the chips are, what the capability differences are. So he does really, really good videos, and they're not slow paced. I mean, they're fairly quick. They're not super long. He doesn't, you know, go into the weeds like we usually do here, you know, for 2 hours on a subject type thing. He'll do, like, you know, 20 to 30-minute videos. So it's a nice chunk to get into your brain and let it sift for a while before you go on to the next episode. So definitely, I've been following his channel now for a while. He's got a ton of good stuff on there, you know, explaining how vector graphics works on the Vectrix. He explained how the bitmap and sprite graphics work on the Fujitsu FM7, which also uses a 6809. Actually, it's two of them. So very interesting series. I would highly recommend it if you want to learn a assembly language as a companion piece to the Steve Bjork series that we've done on CoCoTALK here. This is a good companion piece to go into it too. And he did mention this episode for the first time. He is planning on doing a CoCo 3 specific one later on too. So start getting into GimmyX modes and you know, the GimmyX interrupt controller and stuff like that too. So I'm definitely going to be watching for that, because we've had good series on doing CoCo 1 and 2 stuff, because that's the most common platform for everybody. There hasn't really been any good video series on doing assembly language for the CoCo 3 specifically. I know the CoCo 3 specific features. And I know in Discord, we get tons of questions. How do I set up the Gimme to do this and map the MMU here? And how does all that work and that type of thing? So it's going to be nice to actually have some video of assembly language tutorials for the CoCo 3 coming up. So definitely keep an eye on his page. The last one here, now this was kind of along the lines of the VCC. It's had some reported bugs with certain people's systems. For others, it works fine. I don't know if that's the same situation with the VCC thing. But Sheldon McDonald's released a new Radio Shack DOS utility for Windows specifically, that you copy, you know, disks back and forth. Now, no, Nick Marentes, you've actually ran this and you've been pretty impressed with it. It's less buggy than the one you were using before, I believe.
Yeah,
Did you want to kind of give an explanation of what exactly it does?
It's fairly basic in that it allows you to open up a DSK image and in two separate windows. So it's a dual pane display. So you can open up two DSKs and copy files between the two DSKs, or you can create a DSK image and then copy files to it. Basically, that's it. Well, that's all I've explored so far, but it's quite handy.
Yeah, I noticed he's got a raw disk editor tab.
Yeah, I haven't explored that, so I'm not sure what that does.
Okay.
That looks like an extremely useful utility. They're just copying files between DSK images.
Yeah. Well, I do that a lot, so this will be very handy.
Now, wasn't Stevie? You can remember me if I'm correct on this. Wasn't Paul Fiscarelli working on one that's even more extensive?
Well, Paul Fiscarelli is working on something that is kind of like an archiving tool that will let you catalog all of your floppies, and not only that, but it gets into viewing the contents. You can get like a hex dump of the disk. It'll do like a detokenization, so you can see the basic listing of it. It does a lot of stuff. So specifically, does it let you copy between virtual disks? I don't know. It does. Okay. Yeah.
It does.
So,
but not for OS 9, which is what I really need it for.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So having a tool like this that would be kind of cross-platform between the RS-DOS and the OS 9 would be great if you needed to drag and drop files between these virtual disks, between the different operating systems. That would be pretty handy. Yeah, so I know Paul Fiscarelli's tool does a lot, and I know his is not like available to the public yet because it's kind of constantly being worked on, or at least it's...
Yeah, I view Paul's more as like the one for the hardcore people. Like if you want to detokenize BASIC on the fly, like it's more of the programmer's version. This one is, I think, more meant for the user who just wants to move, this game they just found on the archive to their C Games disk or something.
And I have something slightly similar to this, but it's not to pain. But the John Strong disk tool that I've been using for my BASIC development does let me manipulate files in and out of virtual floppies, and I can copy from one virtual floppy to the other. Having the dual pane would be nice, but other than that, I can still do it.
I know, of course, that's agree with Rob. We need one that does between OS 9 and disk BASIC, because copying between the two, or between two OS 9 disks and two disk BASIC disks, having an all-in-one that does everything would be really, really nice.
Yeah.
So the link to this will be in the video description, I guess.
It's on Facebook.
Yeah, it's also in the YouTube chat right now. It's already been posted there. So.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
And that's it for regular news. Do you want me to just segue straight into GameON news?
Sure, why not?
Okay, I'll stop share and then share the other window. Bring it up so I can see the stupid thing. Hey, first up, Neil Blanchard. Now, he's talked about this before. It's been a project, like a passion project of his for years, literally, to get an arcade quality joystick setup for the CoCo. So this is going to be expensive because this is using real arcade parts, a real red ball arcade joystick, the real buttons that arcade games use. So this is not, just a quickie project. It's called the Gamester. The standard version will come in this nice wood grain case, so it's kind of got that retro look to it, but it's also very solid, and you can like hammer on it when you get mad at a game and it won't bust. Which is, especially for Stevie, I think that's a necessary feature.
A rage quit stick.
Yeah, exactly. You can beat on it; it'll keep ticking, type thing. And there's the drill hole in the back for the joystick port to come out.
That's really cool.
And the cabling that goes into it, so the one DIN plug goes into the CoCo and the other part goes into the actual stick itself.
And the big base is good because it sits stable on the table.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you're a wrist-based joystick player like me, you tend to yank that joystick around. It'll stay on the table better.
I think he also mentioned he's got customization options. So if you want a left-handed version, which is something almost no sticks did for the CoCo, he can actually custom make and put the stick on the right and the buttons on the left type thing. So if you're a lefty, it'll work fine for that. He's also got different case options, like a whole bunch of options. I think the base model, as you see it here, including the cable that plugs into it, obviously, I think was $80 US. And then depending on customization options, some of them don't cost more. It's just, re-drilling holes and just put them in different spots. But other things will cost extra. So he's got a whole bunch of features. And if you go onto the Facebook posting he did, there's a list of some of the options on his little text piece that accompanies it.
Yeah, that's actually a reasonable price. And the other thing he mentions in there too is that there's an adapter for the Dragon. So instead of it being the 5 to 6 pin converter, this also obviously is compatible with the Tandy 1000 that had the same CoCo style DIN connectors with 2 buttons. Yeah, it looks really good.
$80 for all of that's surprisingly good. I was expecting it to be more, but
yeah. No,
so the box alone is probably almost worth $80.
Yeah. I mentioned here optional upgrades. He's got different wood choices, different stain or paint finishes, custom length modular cable if you want a longer one to be sitting way back from your CoCo type thing, left-handed configuration, which I mentioned earlier, and then the Dragon adapter that Steve mentioned. So there's a lot of options to do too. It's basically these are all handmade every time. These are not some machine thing,
right?
Because of the way the case is designed and the different woods and everything else he's going to be able to use. So,
find Canadian product.
So it's obvious it's analog joystick. I'm
no, that's an arcade digital stick.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah, it won't work with every game on the CoCo, but I mean, none of the digital sticks do.
I take umbrage with people who like digital sticks, just so you know. So.
I'll give you umbrage.
I'll take your umbrage and I'll raise you disrespect.
Take a long walk off a short umbrage.
Is it possible to get an analog stick that'll fit in, like an arcade style one that's actually analog? Or
like a spinner?
Oh, a spinner would be cool. Spinner or a paddle, yeah.
No, I'm just thinking it's such a good design, such a good solid box.
I don't see why not. I mean, if you had a spinner or a paddle or something, you probably.
Yeah, I think part of his design is the analog. He's basically taking the analog and converting it to digital, or vice versa. He's taking the digital and sending it out as analog. It's basically doing what the joystick adapters do, right? So it's taking the joystick adapter and.
It's probably just your standard CD4066 adapter design. It's been around since the '80s for every other digital stick, I would guess.
So, I'm just out of curiosity for anybody who knows better than I do. Were there any arcade machines that used analog sticks?
Analog sticks.
Star Wars arcade.
There are analog sticks that are designed for arcades. Because I've seen them. Because I've looked into some of the arcade hardware. Because I thought about building my own arcade module. But yes, you can get analog versions of those, but they're not
common,
cheap. But a lot of you can get other ones that more look like the CoCo Deluxe style sticks, but feel better. But they're just a drop-in module like that, and those are usually like about $50 just for the analog stick.
Yeah, because I was trying to think of were there any arcade
What
games
about
that I could think
trackball?
of that did actually use analog for the sticks. I've seen analog paddles and stuff like Pong and stuff, of course,
Yeah.
but
Would
I don't
Centipede
remember
have been
any analog
analog?
stick games. Which one?
Centipede wasn't analog.
Yeah, it was.
No, it was trackball. It was analog, but it was trackball.
Yeah.
It was a missile
trackball.
command.
Right. It was all
Trackball.
trackball or
Trackball, yeah.
trackballs or real micro switches in the joystick, so you can't break it.
Right.
Even if you're
Jim R is saying that Tail Gunner used a self-centering analog joystick. So.
Oh, there you go. So there was one. I was sure there had to have been.
Yeah, I was
all
trying to
the
think.
thousands of arcade
I was
machines.
thinking if it was anything, it might be something like a flight sim. Like I don't know if Star Wars Arcade had that, or if it was just an 8 or 16 position digital stick. I'm not
maybe.
sure. So.
But that explains why it's expensive to get an analog arcade stick, because apparently it's quite rare. It was actually used.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, if he makes a big hole in the top, you could put a trackball in there, I guess. But
Hmm.
Hey, you're talking.
Yeah, paddles would be kind of neat.
yeah. Next up, now we've seen Puyen videos before, so I'm not going to bother playing it, but I just wanted to show it because this is something new on the CoCo. Dennis Bizon, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. It's somebody I've never seen before doing CoCo stuff, and this is playing on MAME, and he gets through the first 2 levels of the game type thing. But once again, we seem to be seeing an influx of a lot of people new to the CoCo. I mean, Discord itself this week. How many new people did we get, Stevie, this week?
Oh, a handful. Yeah,
Yeah.
like almost a half dozen. You know.
Yeah, so I mean, the market is still expanding, which is really good to hear. And some of the people, like I saw mentioning on Discord, these newer people that have been on, some of them are CoCo users from way back, are finally getting back into it after 20 years and don't even have a CoCo yet again. Others are just getting into retro computing in general, and the CoCo happens to be one of the ones they wanted to get into, and they've joined our Discord, so obviously they're interested in it. So it looks like the market's still expanding, which is good for the hardware and software developers amongst our group here.
Maybe Tandy should come back.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Start manufacturing CoCo 3s again.
There you talk.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, next one is kind of a reminder from Ian Maverick. They announced the Trash Talk 2020 game programming competition. We announced it on here too after they did their official announcement on the Trash Talk podcast. Like, this is months ago already. And the deadline, I believe, is the end of November. And they're still looking for submissions for that. So this is his post on Facebook to remind everybody. There are prizes. There are even some CoCo related prizes. You can get an Orchestra 90. You can get his remake of the Tandy floppy disk controller as prizes if you write a CoCo or MC10. But basically, it's open to any TRS-80, any CoCo, and any Tandy computer model. So there's not really any restrictions. It's just write a game. And the deadline of November 30th, there's a few prizes going for the different types of computers. So. And Chad Edward made this nice, wicked game here. He called it Green Screen of Death, which is basically cleaning the screen to nuclear green and just sitting there. And he wants his trophy already.
Where's my trophy?
He's funny.
That'll do the job.
I had to laugh at his program listing there too. The commenting for the program is longer than the program itself.
You get of course, there must have been optimization suggestions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like take the space out between the go
Put it
to
all
and
in
one, you
one
can speed it up.
line. Yeah. That's why I never show code for anything.
So Curtis, do you like the new layout for Facebook?
No. Anybody else here like it?
I hate it.
I think it's okay. Do you have black or white?
That part I don't mind. Having the color background that you can change is fine, but the making everything so big, honking like on their sidebars and stuff that you can't concentrate on the actual material. So I'm scrolling a lot more than I used to have to. Like, that part I don't like.
They're forcing a mobile look
Yes.
onto a desktop, which never works as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, they're forcing like the phone mobile. At least if they did a tablet, with a fairly decent sized screen. But you can see, like, look at all the black space on the sides here. That didn't used to be there. You could fit the content. Now you're looking at like nothing. Well, that's useful as Facebook. Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Typical.
But the dark mode I do like, Rob.
Yeah, dark mode I do like too, especially if I'm sitting in the dark like I usually am. So this is the
Aw.
actual web page for the contest itself. You can see the URL right up the top there. So if you want to get the details on it, what the prizes are, in case you want to write something for the other tier city models as well, they're listed down near the bottom over here. So you can win, that's actually how you can the whole darn thing. So they'll basically be saying what the available prizes are, and you get to pick out of those prizes if you play. So it's not like you're stuck. You have to get an Orc 90 or have to get a floppy disk controller. You get to pick.
Okay.
And then you can even do commercial releases. So if you want to sell your game commercially and make some money off of it yourself, and also get a free piece of hardware while you're at it, they have one request is that if you are going to sell it as commercial, don't sell it until December, until after the contest is closed. So Nick, here's your chance to get some hardware and make some money off your games. you can get a brand new Orc 90 card to put into your Ferrari.
I should write a TRS-80 Model 1 game.
Let's check this one out. First.
Oops. That was a bit loud. So Boat, John Schaller over at the Amigos here, actually hooked up his CoCo 3, and it's one of the very few systems that he's got still running on real hardware. He's actually gone back to emulators because he had so many problems with some of the SD card solutions and some of the other things that were going on with video capture, etc., which I'm sure some of you have experienced as well. Hi, Brian. But the CoCo is one of the few machines that actually is run reliably enough for him that he's actually staying with the real hardware when he does demonstrations. So he did his first CoCo stream in quite a while. Took a bunch of suggestions from me. He actually had sent me a message about 2 hours earlier saying, "Can you suggest some CoCo games that I could try? Because I'm planning on doing a stream tonight." And I think about 40 or 50 titles in, he finally got back home and he said, no, that's enough. I just need a few to play here tonight.
Curtis, you have a problem.
Yeah, I do. But it's a good problem to have.
It is.
So he played a few there, and I know Nick Marotta, you actually joined the stream a little bit later on. There's a few games that you had not seen before, because I was picking stuff that generally we haven't covered or hasn't been covered on their show before. So did you have any favorites or any comments that you want to say from the
That
stream?
Photon or Proton game looked neat.
Photon, yeah.
Yeah, I want to check that out more. That's the only one that sticks out in my mind as far as one that I don't remember seeing at all.
Yeah, I remember one he was impressed with that he hadn't seen before was Danger Ranger, once he got used to the controls.
Yeah.
Ken Kalish.
Ken Kalish one.
Yeah. Photon is another fine quality Australian product, right?
Nope. That's Jeff Steidel of the
Oh,
States.
is it? Okay.
Yeah.
But he played Dr. J and Larry Bird, and he liked that one, and which apparently we trash or something. I didn't.
I trashed it because I didn't think it was as good as some of the other ones I've seen, other versions of it. But I didn't trash it per se. I just said, I don't think it's the high end of a one-on-one. But he actually said it's pretty similar to the Atari 400 version. So
yeah, it sounds like he's saying he's warm. I don't know if he's warming up to the CoCo, but he's or if he was always pro CoCo. But he said good things about the CoCo games. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Because we focus on some of the negative, like we don't have sound and blah blah blah. But
yeah, which actually Photon, that was the impressive thing, and he was quite impressed with the music in Photon because Photon actually has different musical tracks for several of the mazes as you're going through them that play simultaneously with full, CoCo 3 sound effects and stuff. Here, I'm just letting this ad so I can actually get back to the actual.
So yeah, I have to check it.
Stream here, so I'll just
Curtis is
Arkanoid, because that was our game of the week. He actually played a little bit of that.
Oh, did he? Oh, I missed
this
that.
This doesn't look as good in
composite.
So this is really,
his video capture is washing it out a little bit. I think more than he
still
sees on his end too.
slow,
So
compared to
the colors are a little bit better
Arkanoid.
in real composite, but
Ranger.dsk. Okay.
Did a bit of
These
Digger 3.
guys
Now
remind
Digger
me of,
3, I
like, the
actually asked
Volga
Chet about
Boatman.
this because obviously he's playing
break
an
out in the
RGB
song
colored game on composite. And it
this
looks
guy.
like crap compared
I
to
love
what
his
it could
animation.
look like. And I
It's
actually
great.
asked Chet. I said, "So is there plans for having composite support in Digger 3?" And he goes, "Nope."
So are these piles of
and it's
gold?
something about heathens or something like that.
that-
Exactly what
I don't know what
he
it's
used.
supposed to be
He's
doing.
got his funny
Curtis, can you
opinions.
help me out?
Something about what now?
About time
He's
he
awesome.
stopped supporting composite.
Yeah, he's not planning on supporting composite. And I mean, Nick
Why
Morantes
did
has
I
a
drop
fairly similar attitude towards that too. They both think that composite just did not do a CoCo 3 game justice. So.
Okay.
But I do end up supporting it.
Yeah, and Chet apparently is not planning on supporting it. For, this.
He's stronger than
okay.
me.
Thanks, Rob. I'm sure that's
You
what
want
it
your
is.
Ferraris?
I don't know why I dropped through.
Yeah, it's not like there,
Well, is there- are there
there's not any
hidden,
RGB solutions
things
for the
here?
CoCo
Like, check
3 on
this
the
out.
market.
Yeah, that's true.
Sounds.
You guys should cross promote with some of these here. So,
Yeah,
so
it
there's
does
Danger
look-
Ranger
it
for
does
those
look
not
pretty
sure.
washed out.
Are you?
Yeah.
I was going to say you can send me the.
Rampage is one of his personal favorites.
I mean,
he
like,
actually
this
views
is
this as being
definitely
one of the top
the
2
best looking
Rampage
home
conversions
port,
to any
computer
8-bit system,
port
game
of
console or
Rampage.
computer.
Nice.
I'd say that the Master.
Agree.
Yeah, it's definitely very good.
And here he started on composite instead of.
Boy.
So he's got the
Okay.
proper color set. And I was trying to explain to him the controls and how to play the
You're
game.
gonna have to break
in
it
chat
down for me,
with the head,
Curtis.
which
I'm
has
not
lags.
trying to
so
be
it took him a bit,
difficult.
but-
I on.
Is it a
Yeah, the
complicated
music is good.
Yeah. Actually, it's one of the best, I think, on the CoCo 3, to be honest. And I mean, the early levels don't have much movement going on, but the later levels get tons
Bam.
of these photons
Okay,
flying
I've
around.
got it. I know what's going on
And it
now.
doesn't slow down at all. Plus, it's got
Welcome to
sarcastic, comments and sarcastic voice synthesis in it as well. Anyway,
I've
interesting.
had
He
it
did an hour and a
since- in
half
fact, I've had it
of
since-
streaming, just about. So, good stuff to watch.
Yeah.
Well, I like the fact that he likes still using the actual CoCo hardware, because the fact that at least the SDC is stable.
Yeah, that is a good plug for the CoCo, because he's said numerous times that the CoCo SDC, out of all the 8-bit SDC solutions for any 8-bit computer, the CoCo's is by far the easiest and most stable to use.
There you go.
Yep.
And next, this is a follow-up to last week where we had Brett Gordon on talking about the new networking isometric viewing game that he's going to try to make multiplayer over the network for the CoCo, going through DriveWire, etc. And this is the latest version of his game engine. He put up a little animated GIF of it running on VCC here. They recorded as an animated GIF and put it onto Discord. So you can see here he's actually added the first quest. You have to go get that beer and drink it. So, I'm already into this game now as soon as I saw that. So. And the question mark is basically tiles. So basically the way the game is planning and being working is that the server end, which would be a PC or Mac or whatever, would have the entire massive world in it. And it's going to just send over the network to the CoCo a small part of the grid at a time, and then just give you update tiles depending on the direction you're moving. And right now those question mark tiles are basically, he's not having the buffering going between the two going, but he has a small world sent to the CoCo, and then the CoCo's drawing the actual tiles and drawing the actual graphics of the king and stuff rocking around. And the text and stuff, that's all done on the CoCo side. But the streaming from the server is giving you the maps, updates of whether you picked objects up or not. So this is a kind of a further preview of it compared to what we did last week. And actually, to be honest, in a week, he's progressed quite a bit already. So definitely looking forward
Where is
to
he
that.
posting? Is he posting this in the general game thing? Because maybe we need to open up a new channel just for this.
Yeah, he discussed that when we were talking about it. It was in the general game thing, or maybe it was in software dev. I can't remember which one specifically it was in. But he said if he's far enough along that he's comfortable, he can get the game done, then he wouldn't mind a channel for it. But at this time, he's experimenting to see if this is even possible.
Okay.
So.
Because that's what we need is more Discord channels.
We do. We do.
Exactly what Steve's gonna
I think
say.
what we should do is we should create a channel to discuss future channels.
Oh,
Yeah,
just
obviously,
just
Shivvy's
archive.
been talking to David Ladd and Mark Overholzer far too much lately. He's
I have
encouraging
proposed
more
many
channels.
times the channel, and I have been laughed at.
Just
I will
archive
continue to
Buff
laugh at
Commando.
you for that.
Okay.
Don't worry, we'll be adding 100 more channels next weekend.
Take care. It sounds like Darren has to go. Take care, Darren.
Yeah, see you, Darren. Thanks for popping by,
Catch
and
you,
we'll get you
Darren.
back on
Yeah.
the next one.
Bye, Darren.
Yeah,
Good to see you on,
guys.
mate.
See ya.
Catch you, mate.
Sit down.
Next up, this was kind of exciting. Ched actually has a release date for Digger 3, September 12th,
All right.
2020. And I
When is
love
it?
his little blurb underneath the Digger 3. I don't know if that's coming across the stream
Yeah.
okay.
Oh yes, September 12th.
Because laser beams and spaceships are for emos with glow sticks.
Okay.
Well, the typical.
It's gonna be-
Is
Ched
that
Simpson
is
humor.
that a jab at the Jedi Order and lightsabers?
Arkanoid.
It's
I
a
think
jab of
maybe
a
he
lot of
misspelled-
things simultaneously.
Maybe he misspelled Elmo.
Elmo. Emos with glow sticks. Okay.
So I'm
That's
just glad
awesome.
the official release has been announced. We have a date for it. Hopefully we can make it a GameON challenge, Nick, if you can fit that into the schedule.
Yeah, I was
around
gonna say,
after that
yeah.
time. And this is the one
32nd
that
of
will have
Oct-
all 40 levels, and he said the last level is going to make people hate him. So
It's gonna be released on the 32nd of October.
Oh,
Okay.
it's a Saturday it's releasing on. Look at that.
Okay.
we can preview it on the show, Stevie, if you want. Actually,
Yeah.
play live the real version.
Yep.
Live rage quit.
We better get Stevie one of those Neil Blanchard Gamester joysticks, so when he hucks it across the room, the joystick will still survive.
Yeah. It's gonna do more damage to my walls now than it will the stick. So.
Might have to get a special version that's heavily armored.
A special room that's heavily armored.
Ooh.
So Jim Gary, who ported the Calibeth game from the original Apple II, which was written in 1979 BASIC by Lord British himself, Richard Garriott, the creator of the Ultima series, also an astronaut on the International Space Station a while back, following his father's footsteps. He's now released an updated version of it, ported back to the Dragon 32 and the CoCo, which now supports double speed poke, has some improved fonts. He did a few little tweaks. So it runs a bit faster with the double speed than obviously the MC10 version did. But basically it's the full-blown Calibeth game from back in the day. Now it's basic, so it takes a little bit of time to draw stuff, but it's not bad. And this is what it ran like on the Apple II in the day, because this was the very first graphical RPG I ever played in my life.
Mm-hmm. Now, did the Apple II have the ability to do like real text on the screen, or did you have to do some type of fake font?
They had real text. The HDR command, they had two high-res modes, HDR and HDR2. HDR2 made the full screen, so you had 280 by 192 graphics, and then HDR did 279 or 280 by 100 and that was it 160 or something. And the bottom four lines were real hardware text, so it mixed the two modes together.
Okay.
So your top part was graphics, and then all that four lines at the bottom there of text was actually done with hardware text in the Apple II. So that part went faster on the Apple II. But basically, it's a dungeon crawl with monsters and various things, and 3D perspective.
This is cool. Yeah, I like what Brett's doing. I spent the past week right now playing this game that's not new, but it's new to me, called Skyrim, which is a very expansive kind of role-playing game, but I'm just getting all kinds of ideas on stuff, because I think a project I want to work on eventually is some type of role-playing type game. So this is cool. I like it. It's not terribly slow for being in BASIC.
No, like I said, this is competitive with the original Apple II version back in the day.
Like Dungeons of Daggereth.
Yeah.
Yep. From earlier, like Calibeth came out 3 years before Dungeons of Daggereth, almost 3.5 years, I think, before Dungeons of Daggereth came out.
So this might have been the what inspired Dungeons of Daggereth.
Could be.
Probably. I mean, he came out in 80 or 81, I think, is when Ultima came out, where Calibeth it's above ground stuff. It does have some above ground stuff too, but it's got very coarse, mountains and towns and dungeons. Whereas Ultima actually started adding the color. We had like trees and mountain ranges and castles and all this kind of stuff, seas and boats and all kinds of stuff added on. So we got a lot more extensive. But this was the base engine that Ultima 1 was based on, because the original Ultima 1 was mostly basic as well, though it had some ML routines for doing some fancier effects. And then it was later rewritten in assembly to greatly speed it up. And then Ultima 2 went all assembly, and from there on in it was much faster. But this is kind of the one that started the whole 3D dungeon crawls, as far as I know.
Can you play this one like an idiot in some book?
Go ahead, Rick.
There was actually a whole category of room games, they called them at the time, that was this basic scenario of you have a limited number of options in a box in front of you. I remember many books about these things back in the days. I know way too much about them, so I'll be quiet now.
And then the last one, which was kind of a last-minute one that I think James Diffendaffer mentioned in Discord, is apparently there's a new Millborn card game for the CoCo. Should be on the Color Computer Archive. I didn't get a chance to see if it's actually showing up yet, because, like I said, William only updates once or twice a week as he gets time. And
it's up there.
It is? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Now, he labels it as a non-graphic card game, and it's based on the original Atari 8-bit version. But he's running a 51 by 24 high-res screen utility to give you more text on the screen. So I'm assuming this isn't going to be that slow, because that's an ML driver, and it might have, depending which one he's using, it might have had some special characters to make primitive tile-style graphics with it. I haven't had a chance to actually try it out. Nick, I don't know if you have, Nick Marotta?
No, I just noticed it was up there. It was put up there.
Okay. Because that would be one I'd like to try just to see, because most of the basic card games we get are written in BASIC. I mean, they're drawing the graphics in BASIC and everything else. This is using a high-res screen driver in ML in a BASIC program, so I'd like to see what he did with it. And that's it for the news and GameON news this week.
Neato.
Excellent.
Neato. All right, well, I think the last thing we need to cover before we put a fork in it would be updates and acquisitions, if anybody has any. Maybe we'll take a commercial break before we do that. But quick survey. by show of hands, does anybody have a project update or an acquisition that they want to get into? Brian
I have a
Weasler?
minor project update, but I'll let other people.
Okay, so we have Brian Weasler, we have David O'Connor, we have Curtis Boyle. Jason Reichard, was you having an update too, or is that just your audio barging in?
No update.
Okay, so it sounds like we got about 3 updates. So we'll take a brief commercial break, and then we'll be back with a few updates and acquisitions, and then we will wrap up MIDI talk for today. Thank you, everybody. We'll be right back.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
The Bakers. Now they like a family present. Let's see now. Tandy's color computer system with its own carry-home pack. That's a family affair.
Wow, Dad, a colour computer. A computer cassette recorder.
And Aussie Accountant. That's for me.
And OzQuiz for my school project. And 2 joysticks and a viewed game.
Okay, who's the expert?
Me, Dad.
Thank you, Tandy. Sam.
I'm too sexy for my love, too sexy for my love, love's going to leave me.
Hi there, this is Mark Overholzer, and you're watching CoCoTALK, the world's leading weekly talk show where you can join in. Hey, come watch us and see what's happening in the world of Coco.
All situations depicted in this trailer actually happened. This true story has been anonymized to protect the guilty. Starting in the dead of winter, a group of bored teenagers blew stuff up, learned code cracking, learned phone freaking, hijacked and hacked. No system was safe. No one could catch them, or so they thought. A true story at the dawn of the internet. System hacked.
You can leave your hat on.
Every Christmas, Santa's little helpers go shopping at Radio Shack. Color computer too, a unique build idea from Radio Shack.
Hi, this is Rick Adams, and I'm the author of Temple of Wrong, Shanghai, and now Bomb Threat, and you're listening to Steve Stro on CoCoTALK.
And we're back, everybody. And it's time for everyone's favorite part of the show now. This is project updates and acquisitions. So I think there was a couple of 2 or 3 people who said they had something to do. I think Brian Weasler, you were one of them. So if you want to go ahead and go first.
Okay. Just a couple books here. I'll go ahead and kind of show here. One is the kind of a little bit of a dragon series here. The Working. Is it coming through up here?
Yep.
A little bit of a lag here, but the Working Dragon, 32. So it's a book that
I have the previous version of that called the Unemployed Dragon 32. So obviously it improved its station. So yeah.
Is that the COVID edition? Or
Exactly. Exactly. So it goes through and it has a list of some different games and stuff like that that you can do to, like productivity for doing different things and stuff. So yeah, kind of interesting little book. And then one that Curtis had mentioned a few weeks back, that kind of sparked my curiosity, the advanced graphics for the Dragon computer. And so it goes through and kind of shows different sample programs on how to take advantage of the graphics and sound capabilities that the Dragon has. So kind of a nice book there. And not a big deal, but I've always wanted to get one of these. This is the color computer, the disk system. But the reason I wanted to get it is because it's the spiral.
I was going to say, I don't remember ever seeing a spiral bound one. Mine were.
I have one of those.
Binder.
Yeah.
And a binder bound.
And that's a good idea. That.
Yep. So it lays flat. So I like that. So I have the other ones like you guys are describing, but this one popped up. And then lastly, 2 books. Not exactly. I mean, there is some CoCo references, but also refers to Atari and Commodore and other ones. And I don't know how popular they are. Actually, the cover of the books is what I really like. But then it's kind of interesting. Maybe some of you have seen these though. But it's the adventure games series.
Book adventure. Oh, neat. No, I've not seen that generic one before.
Yeah, there's and then I also have its number 2.
Huh.
And what it has is it goes through on just a couple examples, like some of the games that have like maps and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It actually breaks out, and here's an example.
Okay,
kind of
like a flow chart of the whole map area.
Yep, and so there's like 30. Let's see, let me give you one example here real quick. Where'd that chart go? Oh shoot, I had it marked here. It does show all the different games that they follow and which ones are CoCo related or Atari related. Oh, forgive me. I forgot. I should have had a bookmark. But it goes through, and there is some CoCo related games in here that it does go through. I think King's Quest 3 is in here, and some of the other ones. But it's just kind of neat. It's just kind of a companion book if you're trying to do some of the adventure type games where
absolutely
it gives you the maps and everything and stuff. So, and there's 2 of them that are available out
Do
there.
you happen to know if these are in digital anywhere in an archive? Because I wouldn't mind looking at some of this.
I can certainly look and let you know.
They look to be in really good shape. They're glossy and nice and yeah.
So yeah, but I'm trying to figure out where I can find darn games here. If I could list them off for you guys, but which ones were the CoCo 3 related ones? I don't see the categories of games. I'm missing it here. I'm sorry. Should have had
I remember years ago I had a generic book on how to write an adventure game. I never even finished reading it, but I read enough to realize it turned me on to the concept of doing things through data statements as opposed to like I probably would have wrote a whole bunch of if-thens. Like if you were in room 1 and you said open west door, then go to room 2. You know, but the whole idea of putting everything into data structures was kind of mind expanding for me. And as soon as I saw that piece of it, I never finished reading the book. I just started writing an adventure game, and I actually turned mine to work with my bulletin board system, or is even online.
Well, as an example here, so here in the back here, it shows like the different game versions that are available.
Okay.
Coming
Yeah.
through here or not. So like Sands of Egypt, it breaks down Sands of Egypt in here.
Okay.
So you can along the top here is all the different systems
that was available on.
Yep, and then it has a little bullet point as whether or not that game is covered in here or not. So yeah. So I don't know if it's really considered a cheat manual or not, but
nor of a strategy guide, a multi game strategy guide.
Yep.
Oh, that's neat.
Well, that's all I have.
Cool. Well, I noticed I don't know how much you actually chimed in too much on the MIDI part, but I see a keyboard there over your shoulder. So what are you currently doing in the world of MIDI, or what do you plan on doing?
Well, right now I'm more of just kind of I want to say a user where Brian helped me get set up with his a lot of his songs, and I just enjoy kind of going through and just listening to the music, in that sort of retro fashion. So this keyboard is just one that I picked up for like $20. It actually is a Radio Shack keyboard that has the MIDI ports on the back, and then over here I got Jim Brain's Midi Maestro and the SD card, and the MIDI cables coming out of it, and then I on my up on the screen here is the program that Brian was demonstrating, where it has all those different songs that he was showing off.
Yeah.
And so I've just been kind of going through and just kind of scrolling through and just finding songs that have already been converted over. I do want to go as far as downloading MIDI files myself and following the steps that he laid out in his most recent video, where he's, you download one and then you use a program like Cakewalk to convert it.
Okay.
So I'd like to find some newer songs and just convert them over.
Yeah.
Eventually, I think it might be kind of fun to go in and maybe just start doing some tweaking and maybe take a MIDI file that's there and maybe put a little bit of a twist on it, and just see what I can do. I'm not a musician by any stretch. I just enjoy listening to the songs and then maybe go and just kind of mess around a little bit. And then all I was doing was just more for animation. Is on my other color computer, I have the audio spectrum analyzer.
Uh-huh.
So when I would bring up a song, as an example, for, let's see here, back up here. Play. So when the song would come up, let's see here. You probably can't hear it very well there, though. But when the song would come up, I just had it plugged into the keyboard here, so the audio is coming through the speaker on the one here, and I just have the audio spectrum analyzer just kind of
That's
has
cool.
a little bit of a graphic for it is all.
So you got one CoCo playing the music, and then you got another CoCo analyzing the music. So that's pretty cool.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, it's I got the song Radio Gaga is coming up there. So
Okay. Neat.
But
Neat.
yeah, it was just kind of playing around.
So do you plan on doing any of your own compositions? Just composing some music?
It might be kind of fun to try to do that. I don't know how to play the keyboard, but the nice thing about it is that you can go out there and you can download stuff. Over to my my left here, you can't see it; it's off screen. I did get my hands on a Mac.
Okay.
That has the GarageBand that we talked about.
Yeah.
That's an awesome program.
And so I thought about using the GarageBand, and then you can download a lot of music, and maybe without actually being able to play an instrument, be able to take bits and pieces from other songs and maybe shuffle something together. So
sequence stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Yep, sequence some stuff together there. So yeah.
Yeah.
And just play around with it. It's a world I know nothing about, so it'll be a learning process.
Well, that's neat. You kind of did something that I would be interested in doing, which is to just take the CoCo to play some music on an instrument. Although I know you have the actual keyboard there, and it's nice if you have all that hardware. I'm trying to minimize and downsize my hardware, so I don't know that I would want to go as far as getting the musical synthesizer, the full arrangement keyboard one. But if they made one of those MIDI Pro packs with a built-in sound chip that I could just play the software and listen to it through like a headphone jack, I would totally love to do that. I would totally love to use my real CoCo to play some MIDI files and hear the music,
Well, one of the things you can do, and Jim's video that he did about 5 months ago when they were kind of still in the development of the Midi Maestro, is he used a cable similar to this here. I don't know how well it's going to come through up on the screen, but it's basically a USB cable, and it's a MIDI. So you have your two MIDI in and out cables, and then then it's USB here. And so you can plug this end into your computer.
Mm-hmm.
This would go into your Midi Maestro, and then you can download a program called MIDI OX,
Mm-hmm.
and you can actually play the MIDI files from your CoCo and use your computer
right
as the synth
software synthesizer. Yeah.
Yep, and that's what he was doing when he was demonstrating his. So
okay.
So that's one option too, that you can play the music and go that route.
Yeah. True.
Mm-hmm.
MIDI OX is an extremely useful program. It's like a Swiss Army knife for checking MIDI data stream to see what it's doing. I've used it for a lot of stuff. You can use it for saving. If you spit out what they call a bulk dump from a synthesizer, which is basically all the information telling it how to program that sound, what all its internal setup and everything, you can save the whole lot basically as one big data file using MIDI OX, and then play it back into it and reset the keyboard back up how you had it previously when you previously used it. So really useful program, and it's free.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Who else? David O'Connor, you had an update?
Yeah, just a quick one. As I mentioned last week on the show, I'm running a competition at the moment to name my CoCo 3 in a Model 4 case, and there's been quite a few people who've submitted some quite interesting names and some really amusing ones as well. What I'm after is something really short, sharp, and concise, something that just sums up the project really quickly. It's easy to come off the tongue. And Chad Edward has posted up something in there that actually grabbed my attention. He said, "Oh, why don't you call it CoCo Davo?" And I thought, yeah, that's kind of cool. But then I saw the D, CoCo D, and I thought, why don't we just shorten it, CoCo D? And D is the fourth letter of the alphabet, and it's in a Model 4 case. And so it says CoCo, it says 4, and it's Model D, so it's, like it's something that hasn't been used yet. So far, I'm going to keep running the competition because I did mention that I'll run it until the last weekend in September. So there's still a little while to put in, if anyone thinks of good names or whatever. But for the time being, CoCo D is the one that I like the most. I'm going to sort of attribute that to Chad Edward. But what I also thought I'd do was to get the panel involved as well. On the day, or maybe even the week before it, as people have put in submissions or whatever, I'll make a list of all the submissions and the different names. And I'm going to give away 2 prizes. So I'll give away a copy of the album. That'll be either any of my albums. That'll be both prizes. The first prize will be the one that I pick. And the second one, I thought what I'd do is run a popular vote contest with the panel. So everyone that's on at the end of it, you guys can all vote for which one you like the best. And
that person will get an album too.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Far out, man. Far out. And then was it L. Curtis Boyle? Did you have a update?
Very, very minor updates.
Okay.
Whilst developing the GimmyX Nitrous 9 drivers, Bill discovered a small bug in the latest version of ASM that I'd done for the Nitrous 9 Ease of Use project, the one where I sped it up about 10-12% from the original. And it's a very outside case. It's basically if you're trying to assemble stuff that's outside the module itself, which is only needed on 2 modules out of the entire Nitrous 9 boot, and it worked if it's at the tail end that you're adding extra bytes. So that part worked fine. One module in specific actually does some pre-bytes, and that's the REL module. Relocate is what it stands for, and it's part when you type the DOS command, that's the very first thing that runs. And the DOS command requires, when you load in track 34, that the first 2 bytes have to be O and S in ASCII, and that tells it, oh, this is a legitimate boot track, you can actually execute stuff. Otherwise it just clears the screen and does okay. So he discovered that the assembler had a bug where it's trying to calculate the seriousness of the module, including these extra bytes that shouldn't be included. So I fixed that, and now I'm doing one other bug patch that somebody else found, which is just a formatting on the listing bug, and it's a fairly rare one, but it doesn't affect the output of the assembler. It just makes the listing look a bit wonky. So once I fix that, I will be releasing that as a public release, like Bill did with SDC2 earlier. It'll be part of the updated beta 6 as well, but I'll release that one early just because it was a bug fix that should be out there. So expect that this week.
Okay. And then Ken Reichert is reminding us too that whoever loses the competition will get a copy of Nightmare Highway. So if you don't win the album, you don't
customized for an MC10 or what?
If you don't win the album, you can lose a copy of Nightmare Highway. Good times. All right, well, I think this was a good show. I enjoyed the MIDI talk. I enjoyed seeing what the various programs, because I have not really used too many MIDI programs on the CoCo itself. That's one area I like, the art programs, the paint programs, and the sound stuff I haven't really messed with too much on CoCo. So it was kind of cool to see some of that stuff in action. Like hearing some of the music you guys had to play, which was good stuff, and I look forward to kind of layering on more of that as time goes on. So thank you, Brian, the music man Schubring. Thank you, Rob Inman. Thank you, David O'Connor, and to Darren Ottery, who had to leave, and to Curtis Boyle for kind of pulling all this together this week to come up with the whole MIDI discussion. That was awesome. Thank you, Nick Morota, for our GameON challenge, and Curtis for the news. So we'll go ahead and roll the outro, and we'll come back for final thoughts after these words. This concludes another episode of CoCo Talk, the world's leading live talk show featuring the Tandy Color Computer. For all things CoCo Talk, visit us on the web at CoCoTalk.live. We'd love to hear from you. Send feedback, suggestions, even segments via email to CoCoTalk@CoCoTalk.live.
CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world, keeping the Tandy flame alive. We may be mocked, but we'll never stop, 'cause CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world.
Consider supporting the show with a purchase of merchandise from our retro swag shop at 8bit256.com. If you'd like to become a patron of the show, click the Patreon link at our website at CoCoTalk.live.
CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world, keeping the Tandy flame alive. We may be mocked, but we'll never stop, 'cause CoCoTALK is rocking the 8-bit world.
CoCoTALK would not exist without the community, its cast, crew, and contributors. Thanks go to Curtis Boyle, David Ladd, Mark Overholzer, Grant Leedy, Bruce Moore, Nick Marentes, Ron Delvaux, Rick Adams, Jason Reichert, Richard Lorbieski, Jim Brain, Tom C., Rob Inman, Mark Bosley, Brian Joyce, Ken Reichert, David O'Connor, Brian Weasler, Terry Steggy, Nick Marotta, John Strong, and many more, especially to Steve Bjork for production suggestions and James Differendaffer for making my head explode. Please help support the CoCo community by visiting some of its various contributors. A list of resources is available at imacoconut.com. That's IMACOCONUT.com. The CoCoTALK theme song is copyright 2008 by D. Bruce Moore and Greg Sheeler. Mixed, mastered, and produced by D. Bruce Moore. And this is the tail end of the show. When the train wreck leaves the station, the last car of the train wreck is the CoCo Caboose. This is where we're going to have our final thoughts. There was something I was thinking of asking or saying. Oh, Ron Delvaux had asked me what's up with these gloves. And so these are compression gloves that just keep your hand a little bit tighter because... and this is the problem that I'm running into right now. Playing on CoCo controllers, it hurts my hands, man. So when I was playing with the deluxe joystick now, I'm finding in my older age, these non-ergonomic controllers are giving me pain in my joints, man. So my rheumatoid arthritis is in my diabetes and all these things are kicking in now. So playing on old joysticks hurts my hands, man. So I
won't bug you about playing then. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm gonna be focusing on things that I can do more on an emulator. So I like the deluxe joystick, but the deluxe joystick don't like my hands. So so that's why I'm wearing those gloves. So we're gonna go around the room here. Parting thoughts, final thoughts. L. Curtis Boyle, thank you for all that you do on the show and for the community and stuff. Anything you want to say to the folks at home?
Yeah, there was one comment that D. Bruce Moore had made earlier on. We were talking about MIDI programs from the CoCo, and I was going to read it out of the time, but there was a big discussion going on. I kind of forgot about it, and so I'll just quote him. I wrote music on Lyra for its strong notation while studying music. I was on the cutting edge using the CoCo compared to the others. So at that time, back in the mid 80s, 85, 84, when Lyra came out, that actually was more advanced than anything else out on most home computers at that time. The Atari ST, I don't think was even out yet at that point. So that's a pretty good plug, for how big the MIDI scene on the CoCo got. It was probably out of the 8-bit machines, probably the biggest as far as being popular.
Neat. David O'Connor, any final thoughts from you, sir?
Eat more Vegemite.
All right, there you go. Nick Marotta, what do you have to say to the folks at home?
We've got a couple of scores already submitted for this week's game, which makes me very happy.
Very good. Canyon Climber, you can play with the keyboard, so I don't have to worry about controller cramp. So there you go.
Probably work with the modern controllers too.
Yeah, digital. Rick Euland, anything for the folks at home?
Well, it's been an interesting show, but now I got to go back to this thing.
I need a few more DIN connectors and a few more switches. So there you go. Speaking of switches, Jason Reichert, anything you want to leave the folks at home with takeaway?
Oh, I don't know. What? MIDI what? MIDI who? MIDI what? MIDI through.
MIDI, please. All right, very cool. Brian Weasler, final thoughts from you?
I'm just wondering if Jason's going to make a MIDI-roo.
MIDI-roo.
It would be installed midway between.
Uh-oh, we lost you. We lost you. Midway between what?
If it's a mid through, then it would have to be installed between MIDI components.
There you go. All right, Brian, the Music Man Schubring. Anything you want to say to the folks at home? When can we expect the next installment on your MIDI CoCo series?
Oh, that's a good question. Everybody hearing me all right?
Yeah.
All right. Doing a little bit of moon dance behind me also, so. Hopefully in about a couple weeks. I'm waiting to get my video grabber or captured unit.
And maybe you and I can get together offline and we can figure out what's up with your YouTube channel so you can upload the larger video files. So we kind of need to get that resolved.
That'll work.
Okay, cool. Mark Bose. Mark, did you ever do anything MIDI? Are you MIDI enthusiast?
Actually, I did back in the day, but my keyboard had an accident years ago, so I haven't done anything with it since.
Had an accident, unfortunate accident. Ron Delvaux, you still there? All right, we'll see. We'll come back to Ron. David Ladd, did you enjoy today's show about MIDI? Were you excited about today's show?
Oh, why, yes, I did. It was most musically enlightening to me. And I can't wait to play with all those bits from the 6850.
Wow, that's awesome. And final thoughts from Nicholas Morentes. The guy's a big fan of MIDI.
Sorry, what I miss? I must have done. Did I miss much?
Yeah, you missed a few old midiots.
You're
talking about MIDI.
You're adding MIDI support to your games, Nick. You better get on that.
Apparently.
If Jim makes a version of the board that actually has, as Steve was suggesting, an actual synthesizer chip with built-in MIDI, with still allowing you to do the output stuff if you wanted to, I think that might be something as a decent, sound card type thing, because MIDI tracks are all over the place. There's editors.
Right. I think the problem with the multiple sound devices is that each one has to be spoken to slightly differently, where MIDI is an established standard. You would speak to it one way, the MIDI way, right? And
and that means you can do editing on other computers if you wanted to. You could do it on the CoCo if you wanted to. You could do it in BASIC. You can do it in assembly.
There's a portable MIDI sound box on eBay that you can buy for $100. It's got a USB MIDI interface. It's got its own little battery, so it's totally portable. And that it fits in your pocket essentially. So yeah, driving that might be something.
I've got a MIDI in my pocket, baby. I'm not just happy to be here.
I'm not afraid to use it.
All right.
I'll show you a stream of bits.
Yes. Well, thank you guys for thank you for a great show as always, everyone. And thank you to our audience for being here. Ken Reichard and Mikey and David Ladd and Robert Murphy and Nick Marotta and Rob Inman and Rob Inman posting all our news links. Tom C was out there. Jim R was out there. Canadian Retro Things, 8 Bits in the Basement. Rob Qui-Gon was interested in MIDI too, and Robert Murphy and all kinds of people. James Jones was out here. D. Bruce Moore was here earlier. Explorer VR. Erica was here. All kinds. Terry Steen, author of Balloon Fire and Killer of Couches, was out here. So yeah, I enjoyed the MIDI talk, and this kind of came together this week. You guys just started talking about MIDI and said, hey, why don't we just do MIDI on the show? And I'm like, hey, that's a great idea, because we usually don't have anything to talk about, so this is good. All right, so there we have it. All right, we're going to press the button. Say goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.